Okay, welcome everybody to today's committee to review IT contracts. Today's date's November 20th, 2023. I'll ask everybody to please silence your cell phones, pagers, whatever devices you may have, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with roll call, please.
Mayfield.
Here.
Miller.
Present.
Sassy.
Here.
Hines.
Here.
Corcoran.
Okay, before we get started, the legislative office did get an anonymous letter in the legislative mailbox, and all committee members have it. It was also turned over to the county attorney's office. Mr. Golden, do you have any comments on that letter? Any opinions?
Well, I mean, it's obviously written by someone who's somewhat bitter about not being paid in comparison to some others. But I think what's more important is what this person is doing is simply saying that there's a lot of alternative ways to do procurement for professional services and otherwise, and specifically with IT. But this person never takes issue specifically that the process that was used for the initial contract and the two amendments was not in accordance with the law. And yes, there are alternate ways to procure many things, including professional services, but the one that was chosen was done properly. The only other small thing that I would mention is that this person chided Commissioner Sawatka on an improper legal reference to a statute, saying that it was Commissioner Sawatka mentioned that professional services are done in connection with 104, when in fact the correct statute is 104-B, which was simply a slight misstatement. Actually, when Commissioner Sawatka was discussing the statute, she was discussing 104-B. So it wasn't that she didn't know what it was just a slight misstatement. And also to say that my deputy county attorney, Carol Pierce, was also unaware of it because she didn't speak up. She didn't speak up because it was a silly reference to make. I mean, I think if Carol had interrupted Commissioner Sawatka and said, "No, Sam, it's not 104, it's 104-B," I think all of you would have thought that that was pretty petty, because it had no substance to it at all. In fact, Carol Pierce has litigated 104-B in the highest court in New York State. So, I mean, we're all well aware of it. It was just a slight misreference. But I think that sort of focus on the small rather than big picture is apparently what this person is all about. But there's, in the end, I think it's absolutely worthless, because it doesn't say, pertinent to your inquiry, that the initial procurement contract, which ended up to be a contract, and two amendments to that were illegal under your procurement code, under the state law, or under the ethics code.
Okay, and this is unsigned. We have no idea who it came from, and I think it's the opinion of this committee that we're not looking for unsigned, unidentified information. If someone wants to come before us and has information that they'd like to present to us, by all means, they can contact the legislative office or anybody on this committee, identify themselves, and if they have pertinent information that we wish to hear, then we can set that up. But
No name, no
unsigned
credibility.
documents, it was actually snuck into the legislative mailbox in the post, in the mailroom downstairs, I guess, addressed to legislative council with no identifying information. So we have the letter, it's here, and I personally am not going to address it because it just has individual opinions, which everybody has opinions. It does state some facts and laws, but that's about it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now we'll move on. I thought the best presenters we should hear from are the four legislators that brought this to our attention. And I thought we'd start first with Legislator Ramos, since I know she started the press conference and might have been the first legislator involved. So please join us. If you want to tell us what you want to tell us first, and then we can ask you questions or start with questions, whichever you prefer.
Sure.
So I want to start by responding to some inaccurate information that was fueled by politics and ego, and that was taken as truth by Mr. Chapman last week. To begin with, I find it peculiar that me and my colleagues are here being brought to question when we are the ones who brought forth information and have nothing additional to add, quite frankly, but nonetheless, here we are. So let's start with the way I speak. When I said the math isn't mathing, I am young. I have been alive as long as Mr. Chapman says he has experience. I am proud of my colloquialism and slang. People understand and can relate. Although he believes I am incompetent and don't do my job, I graduated summa cum laude with my master's in public administration, became a legislator and executive director at 29 years old, have led Municipal Economic Development Committee and a Human Rights Commission, am an adjunct professor, and I made history in getting elected to this legislature, and am working now at the national level in the public policy space. But somehow I'm very incompetent to be doing all of the above. I am surprised that in his 30+ years of experience in government, he does not recognize that quotes get editorialized in the news, as I explicitly told the Mid-Hudson News that I acknowledge that according to the executive order, appointing Harry Poor was necessary. Still, I did not understand why he would have to be appointed if we supposedly have an interim CIO for $800K, which I think is a logical question. Tom, you were the first legislator to welcome me to the legislature. I will never forget that. And I thank you so much for that. You have been very kind and generous. We have had very lively conversations throughout my time here on many different topics. And you're someone who I genuinely grew to have a lot of respect for. I have to say that I'm very disheartened and disappointed that you corroborated with Mr. Chapman to fit a conspiracy that in some way this all ties to Dory, of which, with all due respect, was not even a thought in my process to highlight what I believe to be impropriety. The conspiracy theory that there's some connection to Dory, I fully reject it. James is a big boy and can handle his own political battles. I am not his hit woman for his political pursuits, nor anyone else's, as I have other aspirations with my life that do not include climbing a political ladder, which allows me to be present, intentional, and move with integrity, showing up consistently everywhere I go. In my conversation with you, Tom, I questioned positions that seemingly do not exist or have been vacant for more than a decade, like the ombudsman, that suddenly get filled. I also gave the example of the special assistant to the county executive as an example, further reiterating that Dory was never a point of interest for me, as much as my question around a narrative that people get hooked up with jobs in Orange County. That was the extent of reiterating my commentary. Not once did Langdon get mentioned. Not once did I say anything about her employment and where her employment should stand, other than perhaps questioning what made her qualified to be an ombudsman, a more than decade-old vacant position in the county. Again, another logical question. You answered and you provided me context that these positions exist in the county budget and told me that if I had any other questions, as always, that I could come to you. That was the extent of that conversation we had in the Democratic caucus room a few months ago. So I reject any idea that I was alluding to or suggesting that Dory should not, whatever was what I was accused of, that Mr. Chapman should be discriminatory. However, the political route was chosen to attack my credibility, which is a personal opinion and narrative that some will hold, and I'm okay with that, because folks that do not know me, folks that do know me, which span across party lines and ages in this county and beyond, know my integrity is never to be questioned, and I thank my mother for that. I am not here to be liked, to be popular, or to fall in line and abide by what processes others imagine for me. I am here to work and act in the best interest of my constituents. No one has the right to question my process. I believe I saw impropriety, and me and my colleagues took a course of action we deemed fit. My attendance. This year alone, there's roughly about 55 scheduled calendar meetings this calendar year between legislative sessions, committee meetings, and special meetings. I have missed 6. But you don't have to believe me. Everything can be proven through our recordings that live permanently on YouTube, and you can see my body when I'm in these chairs and when I'm not. But tell me how much I'm not here. I have outside of this time commitment made throughout my term. Also, outside of my time in being in these committee meetings and in sessions, I also have made time the past 2 years to meet with multiple department heads in an effort to establish rapport, to gain an understanding of how departments work across the county. So what people see here is not all encompassing of who I am and the work that I've been doing in this county for the past 2 years. I may not always get it right, and I can own that. I can be humble enough to say that I don't always get it right. The day of the press conference, I misquoted the salary. Okay, I own that. I can hold that because I'm not so egotistical to recognize that I'm not going to always get things right. But I adamantly stand by my due diligence and my deliberate approach to how I choose to govern, because my governing style is my style in general. Now, I want to highlight a few discrepancies from last week, and I just want to preface by saying that this is with all due respect to Commissioner Sokoda. I have Samantha. I don't know her. I have not gotten the opportunity to sit down with her, so I just want to, preface by saying that this is not anything personal against her. We heard that last week that it was Langdon Chapman's idea to hire his brother-in-law for an $800,000 no-bid contract. He had already put his finger on the scale when he allegedly recused himself. The fix was already in. But this was just casually dropped in. Here's the thing, having a relationship isn't the main issue, but rather the obscene amount of money this contract is for by way of connection. Yes, other folks have relatives that work in county government, absolutely. But here's the main difference. They are civil service or appointed positions of which we know their pay scales, and their pay scales are public. Perhaps one of the most concerning things that we discovered is that Commissioner Sokoda didn't recognize the justification letter that Chairman Hines pointed out was written to nobody. The commissioner said she had a different letter in her file and said the one she had was from the county executive. Why was that not provided before? This is particularly concerning because it is important to know who really requested the contract, extension and expansion. Of course, it would not have made sense for Commissioner Sokoda to make a request to herself, as the letter provided suggests. The commissioner also said that Star CIO was competitive and fair based on the research she had done. I would like to know what research, where are those quotes? She said she checked around, but if she did, how come other quotes weren't provided? The other two quotes from Securance and Gartner were pulled from the GSCA database. The two quotes that were provided from Securance and Gartner are both much less expensive than Star CIO. The commissioner said the reason she went with Star CIO was because they were willing to come on site and others were not. How does she know that? The county attorney has confirmed that neither firm was contacted in the time frame of November through January. In fact, he claimed that neither firm had to be contacted and that they could use their prices as piggybacks without knowledge or consent. So how could the county honestly determine a professional service like a consultant was the best value without even asking competing firms what or who they could or would provide? Maybe they would provide on-site support. The county didn't inquire because they had already picked their consultant. Star CIO had a contract for $65,000 issued in January, the one signed by Harry Ford. By the end of February, they had already invoiced $65,000 and then invoiced the following before their July contract was executed by Alicia D'Amico with no date. Commissioner Sokoda said that the contract wasn't necessarily for 2 consecutive months, but rather for a specific number of days. She blamed COVID as part of the reason they needed this flexibility. The invoicing doesn't support this statement. Star CIO invoiced Orange County $32,500 each month consistently, which would suggest that they were providing the 4 on-site days and 32 remote hours every 4-week period as outlined in their contract. This means that by February 28th, 2023, they had exhausted their January contract amount. And note that the next contract extension isn't issued until July. But again, they had exhausted their contract amount by January because in March, there was $32,500 invoiced. In April, $32,500 invoiced. In May, $32,500 invoiced. In June, $32,500 invoiced. There is no way that the statement that this contract is fully compliant holds water. How is this vendor able to issue invoices greater than the contract and before being issued another contract extension? The commissioner said she didn't know and didn't ask how many people worked for Star CIO and how many employees were connected to the first contract or the subsequent extension of the contracts. Yet she is listed on the contract form as the person to ask regarding questions on the contract. She also signed off on the first page that she vetted the contractor and has deemed them fit to serve the county. How good was her due diligence if she can't answer this basic question? these are the main discrepancies that I was able to work through and pick out from last week. And that's pretty much all I have.
Thank you, legislator. Just for all four of you legislators, we asked you here because we thought it was a courtesy. I mean, you were at a press conference and I thought this would be a better opportunity for you to lay out the complete thoughts as opposed to
Sure.
a few spot minutes. So it's not like we did this to disrespect you, just the opposite. I think we did it to be respectful for the four of you to come before us. And
Well, I appreciate that explanation, Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you.
anybody want to start the questioning? Tom?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Genesis.
Good morning.
I just have a couple quick questions, and this isn't an adversarial thing. First of all, I generally enjoy talking and working with you.
Likewise.
You're a bright young person who, you make this old-time guy get a little happier about being involved in government. And even if we don't agree, you and I have had some great conversations. So today, I hope we can continue to have that, and in the future as well, because I do have a great deal of respect for you and I admire you. I just have a couple of questions, and this is not adversarial. So when you guys were outside, you had mentioned that you did your due diligence, and of course, you said you tried to reach out and get the facts. And my only question is, at any time, did you reach out to the commissioner, Sam Twycott?
I did not. No.
And that's the question I have right now.
Again, I took the course of action along with my colleagues that we deemed appropriate.
Okay,
Rob?
thank you, Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you, Genesis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Genesis. Good to see you this morning. Just kind of as a follow-up to that as well, I mean, you've made some serious accusations, which I respect. And, I'm trying to keep politics out of it,
Sure.
which we should. There's
I
no
agree.
Democrat answer, there's no Republican answer, there's only the right
100%.
answer. So, I mean, we rely on legal counsel all the way around to find those answers. But my question is that it appears on Monday, October 16th, you made the request as a group.
Sure.
And within a day or two, you held a press conference.
Mm-hmm.
Had you gathered that information, and the accusation, I believe, was made that the county executive, the executive branch had dropped the ball and had not supplied you that information you were looking for.
Mhm.
Don't you think it would take more than a day or two to get all that information prior to holding a press conference?
That's not an accurate timeline.
Okay.
Let me pull up a calendar because that's not the accurate timeline.
If I may, I believe the press event was October 25th.
Okay,
Exactly.
so the request was made on Monday, the 16th, so the 25th, and so my notes are incorrect. And so about a week later or so, you held a press conference.
Yeah.
So do you think a week is enough time for the county executive
So-
branch to respond to you?
So here's the thing, right? So I sent an email to the county executive and the deputy county executive on behalf of my colleagues and I on that Monday. It was about Tuesday, the following day, we hadn't even received an acknowledgement, right? Because here's the thing, none of us were expecting them to provide us the information, but rather they could source or connect us to the appropriate, because we weren't sure if it was general services, if it was the county attorney. So with that said, we waited a day and a half, right? Like you could have at least said received, acknowledged, whatever. We received no response at all. So that's when we decided to do a press release, not a press conference. And then, as you're all aware, because we all received it at the same time, we got the packet of information that Friday of that week. So after receiving the information and reviewing the information and putting what we felt were discrepancies together, that's when we decided to hold the press conference.
Okay, but you had not spoken as legislative adjunct at the procurement
No.
supplier and
No.
county attorney, no?
No, I mean, the county attorney responded, right, with the response. And so, again, I understand that we may not agree on the process, and that's perfectly fine. But, you as a legislator can hold whatever process you choose, right? Just like Tom, just like Kevin Darian, just like everyone can hold their own process here, right? We're elected officials. So I just want to uplift that because, I can understand that folks may have, I spoke with Katie and Tom, and they both gave me that feedback that they felt that, things could have been handled differently. And that's a conversation, that is subjective. But at the end of the day, I stand by the process that we put forward.
And just as a follow-up, you would describe the 800,000 as an obscene amount of money,
Mhm.
which it is a considerable amount of money.
Sure.
Had you looked at the previous contract with UTC, the company that was before Star?
So I have started to try to do some research around that. I don't have exact numbers at this time, but what I do know is that UTC has been contracted to do multiple aspects of IT, right? So I would be curious to know for this particular scope of work and services, what UTC was being paid. I know they were referred to as a failed vendor. I also would like to understand what that actually means and what kind of paperwork or what kind of paper trail was there to indicate that they were in fact a failed vendor. Because I think in order to call someone a failed vendor, I would hope that you have something supporting that claim, right? So I think it's a great piece of information for all of us to know and understand how much UTC was getting paid for this particular scope of work, because they do multiple things throughout the county.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Legislator Ramos. Firstly, I want to echo kind of your sentiments about, when we arrive here, everyone has ideas of how we should respond to things and the timeliness that we should respond to things. And the reality is that we all arrive to our conclusions differently. And so whether I agree or whether any of us agree or disagree, I think that it's always important when anyone comes up and says they see something that's wrong and they want to try to raise concerns about it. I think that is a completely valid and normal process. So, I'm not going to say I agree or disagree because I want to be completely objective here, but I think that it is always an important thing for anyone to do that. And so we're here now to look at the facts of as they're presented to us. I'm sure that when you first started to hear about all the concerns, your immediate reaction was, we need to do what's best for the residents of Orange County. I'm guessing that's correct, right? As you're doing your analysis and you're doing your due diligence, I know that when I saw the press conference, you all talked about some of the different contracts in other counties. Do you recall what some of those contracts look like in other counties in comparison to Orange County? I believe they were substantially different or higher here than they were in others.
We weren't talking about contracts. We referenced the CIO position in Nassau County,
Yes.
which has significantly larger budget and population than Orange County. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, because it's been a few weeks, the salary was like 140 or 150 a year. That's what I had surfaced. And here's the reality, my previous employer, which is not a secret, Mount St. Mary College, got cyber attacked. I am personally and intimately familiar and aware with the time and day and age that we're living in, where this is a very real thing, right? That organizations, government, nonprofits, private sector are all having to take into consideration. And I, just like probably all of us in this room, want to ensure that our county has the best IT services and the best IT processes to ensure that we are protected in a deliberate way. However, for me, it is also important that the contracts that we are the contracts that we're procuring as a county for these services are sourced in ethical ways, and that they are that the pay for them is within market range. So, Kevin Darren, you were part of that initial conversation when I pulled the caucus together, where I called a meeting with the caucus to share the concerns. And my exact words during that meeting were, I'm not accusing anyone, I'm not jumping to conclusions, and I'm not making assumptions here. Because at that time, we didn't even have any of this information, so I really had no idea what was going on. And so the approach was, we're going to look at this information, we're going to, take this, and we're going to see what our conclusions are, and what, if any, issues exist within these contracts. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. as you were looking through more information, and I think that, you know, what leads legislators or any elected official or leaders to want to take it to the next level, to escalate it further. What was it that was most striking for you in the information as you're doing your fact finding? That was for you by far the most pivotally important, that you felt like there's not just smoke, I see fire. What was that like a few points that you really reflected for you?
You know, so one, again, my understanding is that for professional services, any amount over $100,000 should go out to public bid. That was not the case. And then I understand that, you know, the county attorney has laid out, according to the county procurement policy, why that is the way it is. Which, you know, I'm not here, I can't even get into that. But the point is that for me, it was problematic, right? And actually, you know, as of this morning, which I'm curious to see myself, but apparently a RFP from 20, I think, I don't remember the year, I think, was it 2016, 2017 was sourced for the exact same services that Star CIO has been providing. This was in the Mid-Hudson News this morning. So I'd love to see that RFP myself, because if there was an RFP that some way, somehow the news has been able to obtain for the same services, for the same scope of services, it begs the question, why was there not an RFP in this instance, right? And again, like I said with UTC, if they're a failed vendor, where's the documentation to provide to support that claim, or what can be really signal to an indicator, right, that UTC was a failed vendor, that some way, somehow Star CIO was the vendor and the only vendor that could come in and elevate the processes and issues at hand. So I think that was one of the biggest things. And then the other thing was, again, how the contract just kept growing in its scope and the amounts. And I wasn't seeing, like, is there a full team, right? Where this could be justified. If you're paying multiple people, then I could understand this, you know, huge contract amount, but that was not the case. And again, I haven't been in government for 30 years, and I'm not a prosecutor or a criminal investigator by any means. Again, I just spent a weekend reading through and dissecting and seeing what I believed was a decision that was not made in the best interest of taxpayer money.
Thank you, legislator.
Okay. My questions are, did this come to you through a whistleblower or somebody contacted you?
So this came to me through Senator Skoufis, and Senator Skoufis got this through a whistleblower. And you know, I'm not at liberty to disclose, obviously, who that person is.
Do you know if that individual is willing to come forward to this committee or wants to?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You know, I know that there's a lot of fear for retaliation and just you know, fear, especially after what we saw last week in Display, which was a 40-minute attack. I'm not sure that people feel comfortable or safe coming into this room, giving their what they feel are issues in this county.
So then Senator Skoufis contacted you?
Yes, in my capacity as a county legislator, to say this is information that has come to me through such and such person, and you know, pretty much, what do you think and what do you want to do with this, right? It wasn't a situation of, this is what we're going to do, this is what you're going to do. Again, you know, he's a big boy, he can handle his own political battles. One thing about me, you know, again, I march to the beat of my own drum, with all due respect. You know, I'm not here to placate to political party things, because this to me has nothing, and I said it in the press conference, this is not a partisan issue to me. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. This is just simply about getting to the bottom of what's right and what's wrong.
The binder in front of you, if you just want to open that, I believe that binder is a compilation of the information that was turned over, I believe, to you from the county
Yeah.
attorney's office.
Mm-hmm.
If you just look at the first page after the green cover,
Mm-hmm.
is that your letter to the county executive? Or your email? It's not dated, or I don't know if it was mailed or emailed or.
Yeah. I mean, this was like this is not the full.
Just the first
Oh.
page, right under the first green
There you go.
got it.
Right there.
Yes.
That's was that an email or a letter to the county exec?
I emailed this to the county exec.
And you wrote that?
Yes.
Okay. It just was unsigned, that's why I asked. And,
It's signed.
well, it has 3 names on it, but nobody signed it, so I just didn't know.
Oh, you mean like a
That's all.
literal?
Well, yeah, it's semantics. I just didn't know which one of the 3 legislators wrote the letter, if any.
Well, it's, it was basically saying as the underside.
Yeah. no problem.
So, yeah.
So all those documents were in your possession. The last section is the RFP policy.
Mhm.
You mentioned that you were reading documents all weekend long. Did you have other information that maybe someone else gave you other than the information in that binder?
No, I mean, if I had other information, I would bring it forward.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I would definitely have brought it forward.
All right. So that's the total information you had
This is
prior
it.
to the press conference.
Yes.
That's all I have. Anybody else, Rob?
Were there any foils that you made as a group?
No.
No.
Because this pretty much answered our request, so we didn't have to do any foils.
Okay. You mentioned if there were multiple people, then the 800 would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think just from, the perspective of, what are we, and I know that the commissioner said that there is a breakdown of all the services provided. But when you're talking about someone who's on site 1 day a week, and then throughout the span of the contract has added, I believe, 2 other project managers in. Again, I'm trying to understand where $800,000 fits the bill, right? So
But we agree it was more than one person.
that's what I understand from the evolution of the contracts. He's brought at least one other project manager on. And so I don't know if that means that, he's still on while the other project manager's on. I'm not sure. But even when you look at even if there's 3 folks, right, especially with him, with them essentially not being full-time and not providing full-time services.
Anybody else?
Just one last question. So from the moment that you had the press conference and now that you got more information, I'm sure that there are some areas where you felt like, okay, we had these questions, now we have these answers, now we have some answers, now I have more questions. Or what would you say are the areas where you feel, you've been able to come to terms with some things that have been answered in a way that was justifiable, or others that you still have really deep questions about that make you feel have concerns?
I mean, I still stand by the fact that I believe that there was impropriety around this, regardless of what has been said up to this point by others, just simply by all the things that I don't want to necessarily go through all my bullets again. But again, right, we can bring up that there's relatives working here and other folks working here, and that's fine, but we know what they're getting paid, right? Like, they are civil service or appointed folks, and so we know their pay scale, and we know what they're making, right? This was something that unless we had asked for, we technically would not have known about. My understanding is that, legislators weren't aware of this contract or the amount of this contract, so that's a very different circumstance and situation for, than to say, oh yeah, like, I'm, so many relatives work here, sure, that's all fine, so I think, the best way I can answer that is I still stand by what I've said. But what I've said, and that's another thing, because I can't be lumped into, I can only speak for my own remarks. So I know other things have been said. No, I've never personally attacked anyone or called anyone anything, because that's not my style. There's no need for that. I try my best to stick to the facts. I got again, I got the day of the press conference, I got the note on the proposed salary for the CIO wrong. I own that. But I think that, I listed my points earlier in terms of what remains of concern to me.
Thank you, Legislator Ramos.
Thank you. Tom?
Thank you, Chairman. Genesis, just a quick question. So in response to your letter, you received this letter back. It's just before tab 1, and this is from the county attorney answering portions of your letter.
Mhm.
And we also heard from Commissioner Sam Whitehall last week. Who came in. So just reading back here, you had said that you still believe that there was impropriety done here. So is it safe to say that you disagree with the letter that the county attorney has sent to you in terms of the contract for professional services. In addition, last week, I'm gonna paraphrase, so pardon me if I didn't say the words right. Our commissioner said that she believed that the contracts were done under the proper procurement policy. So it's your opinion that you don't agree with that?
Yeah, I don't agree with that. And I will say this, I recognize and I want to, bring in that I respect the county attorney's, response, I think he's doing his job. I feel that him and I have good rapport. I don't know him as well either, but, I feel that he responded in the way that he could and that he should, quite frankly, in his capacity as county attorney. I still, again, based on the bullets that I outlined earlier, feel that there are some gaps here. And that just simply because someone says, I omitted that this person was my brother-in-law, I don't know that necessarily makes the whole situation any better. You still were the person that introduced your brother-in-law to the county, and now your brother-in-law has an $800,000 contract with the county.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
Next up, I think, be best to hear from Minority Leader Mike Paduch. You want to talk first or have us go into questions? What's your pleasure?
Sorry, say it again.
Would you like to tell us what is on your mind first or have us ask
Yeah, I
questions?
think most of it was already said, but as the minority leader, when a member of my caucus brings information to my attention, like has happened before, I'll give you a perfect example with the IDA, and they have a concern with it, I will always help and support to get to the bottom of the problem that's presented. The information that was presented to me before the press conference that was reviewed with other caucus members was very concerning. And after reviewing it, the information and the documents with most of my caucus members, I agreed to support moving forward to get the problem resolved, which is why we're at this meeting today. Earlier, though, I did have two questions I wanted to ask, and now they've both been answered. But I'm just going to review what they were anyway, because I was caught off guard here. But before I wanted to answer any of your questions, and I was wondering if the chairwoman or any member of the committee received any new documents or correspondence regarding the CIO contract that was not in the original response from the county to me and two legislators. And obviously there was now. So you guys haven't really had time to review any of that anonymous letter, I'll say, because I don't know who the whistleblower
The
is.
anonymous letter is 4 pages and trust me, we've all read it.
Did you just receive it today?
No.
Okay, well,
I received it today, but I did.
see,
And the other answer to your question is we have new information from the county attorney's office because we asked them for emails and correspondence and things like that. And we got that package. I got it emailed to me over the weekend or Friday night, maybe. Yeah, Friday night. And then the physical copies were put into our binders today. Not that one at the table.
so you really haven't had a chance to review them?
I reviewed every document.
I'm sure you
If you
probably did.
spend the rest of
I'm
the
sure
day
you
here,
probably
you'll know that.
Okay, I will spend the rest of the day here as well. My other question was if the answer was no, I was going to ask the attorney if she had, because I was under the impression that there was a letter submitted, which nobody talked about, and which was the one that you have now, which I haven't even seen, and I don't know who the whistleblower is either, so.
Somebody told you they sent a letter?
No, I heard that there was a letter sent here, and I wanted to ask the question if anybody received it, because I haven't seen it. And apparently the committee, it should have been probably one of the most things that you reviewed before this meeting, I would say, whether it was blown off this morning. I think Mr. Golden just, and actually, to be honest, I didn't hear a lot of what he had to say sitting directly behind him, but it was like, it's not important because it wasn't signed. Well, I just want to remind you again, we've been here before, I've been here before, and we've uncovered some really nasty stuff that's happened in this county, and we addressed it, and that's what we're doing now. That's why I'm a part of it.
Yeah, so that letter came, I don't remember the date, but I know Katie Pinelli was aware of it. Legislative counsel was addressed to her. And as far as I know, she immediately went to the county attorney, gave him or his office a copy so that they were aware that there were allegations out there. And we have the letter as part of the record in this file, but it basically quotes laws and gives an opinion of, I assume, either one individual. I don't know who wrote the letter, so I have no idea. But, sneaking a letter into a mailbox isn't really what I'm after. I'm after the facts.
No, I
If
agree.
there's facts in there, that's great, but to
Right.
me, that looks like an opinion letter. But the committee has certainly read it and has that information in our heads, and we can use that information for further questioning.
Okay, fair enough. I
That's the way
just
I
had those
take
2 points that I was concerned that something might have been submitted from a whistleblower. And if it had, if you guys had reviewed it, and apparently you have, so I'm glad to hear
So
that.
somebody
'Cause
somebody let you know there was a letter out there.
I haven't seen it though. I haven't seen it or know who a whistleblower is.
But someone let you know there was a letter out there.
I heard there was a letter delivered to this office that should have been part of the investigation from the beginning. I don't know when it got
That
here. I
letter
don't
was
know when
not
it
here.
was
When
sent.
did we get the letter, Betsy?
The letter came, I believe, on Thursday at around 2:30 when the mail was picked up.
So
Okay,
then-
like I said, I just
And that
wanted to
was
make
after
sure
our
that.
last meeting, so this is the first meeting that we've had an
Okay.
opportunity
Fair
to
enough.
discuss it. We're not hiding it, we opened the meeting with that,
Fair
just so you know.
Yeah,
Full
I-
transparency.
And I thought that maybe if I was called first, they were my questions. So you took care of it beforehand, so I'm good to go.
Questions for Mr. Paduk, anybody? No?
Thank you, Chairman. Minority Leader, when you guys were standing outside, you had mentioned, you read from a statement and you said you were outraged. You also said that you were going to seek help from legislative attorney in terms of a resolution for the HR commissioner to resign. Did you ever follow through on that?
No, sir, I did not, because we also asked in that same time I asked the chairwoman to convene a committee to review it before any action would be taken.
Thank you. And I just have one other question. You also mentioned that you said you wanted to change the rules, that this will never happen again. And you mentioned you wanted to pass a local law. What did you mean by that?
Well, I meant that if there's improprieties that we are looking into that may be recognized, that we, as a legislator, we control, we make laws. So if there's any way to prevent any improprieties from happening, I think we owe it to the taxpayers of Orange County as well as ourselves. That's what we're supposed to do here. We're supposed to look at laws that make things better. And we've done that in the past, and I've been part of it and been very proud of that, so.
I just have one final question. I asked Genesis this, and I'll ask you, Mike. We have received correspondence back from the county attorney in regards to your letter. We also had Commissioner Sam Swicotta here last week. It is their opinions that the process was followed properly according to the procurement policy Monday morning. In your opinion, do you agree with their opinions on those matters?
Not 100%.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes. Mike, good to see you this morning. Couple of quick, Mike, how long have you been a legislator?
26 years.
26 years, okay,
Long time.
a long time. And I know you're a union guy, I was a union guy. I know with the union, one of their famous sayings was when things appeared anonymous, it's no name, no credibility. Would you agree that if that letter that you heard was coming had a signature to it, it had more credibility?
Any letter would, sure.
Yeah.
It's but not to not present facts. Look, we've gotten letters anonymous before and they were right on. So why wouldn't you at least consider some of the concerns that were brought forward and discuss it with the people who have control of it?
Right, but I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if it had a name, did you agree there'd be more credibility to it?
Of course it
And if
would.
that person is out there and you knew the letter was coming, that person might be a very important person to sit there.
That could be possible.
And again, I want to take politics out of it. There's no right answer, there's no right, wrong answer. There's, a Democrat or Republican, it's the right answer. And you're right. I mean, if there's an impropriety, if there's something illegal or unjust here, it should be uncovered and should be addressed. And if that means legislation, then I think that you'd have full support from this legislature. But I want to go to the county attorney's letter here, Mike. You've been around for a long time. And he puts in here, and again, it's disturbing when I say take politics out of it, whatever anyone's opinion may be on it, that it is kind of suspect that, a request was made and then a couple days later is a press conference. And then a week later, there's, other things going on, or a press release. You've been here a long time, you know the process, and as Mr. Golden states in here, I understand that this request was not one generated on behalf of all legislators. However, in the future, it would be most productive if a more conciliatory request process was used by legislators. In other words, you know the ropes, you know the rules, you've been through it. Did you make any attempt to talk to Mr. Golden or Mr. Chapman or any others? to get
There
to
are
the
no
bottom of this?
rules, Rob, that govern how I govern. In the past, I could revert to many different things where if I followed the rules, something wouldn't have been recognized. And you say following rules, look, if I got
Procedure or
information,
any-
I got information from my caucus members, like I said, as the minority leader, it was presented to me. I reviewed it with them, we talked about it for a long time before there was a press conference. The press conference really makes you take action. That's exactly what happened here, and it's exactly what needs to happen to rectify any improprieties, if there are any.
Okay, so you made no foils, no anything?
No foils, no.
No. Why didn't the senator contact you as a minority leader?
I have no clue.
Thank you.
When did you find out about that letter? Did you know about it before we did?
No, I heard about the letter this weekend, that there was a letter supposedly submitted. So my question would be, if it was submitted, when, who submitted it, which is anonymous, I guess, and why the committee hasn't mentioned that they received anything or anybody even talked about it. So that's why I wanted to ask today, because I did hear that this past weekend.
You know who wrote the letter?
I do not,
Okay.
but I wish I did.
Anybody else have any questions?
Thank you, Chairman. Quick question, Mike. Prior to the press conference, prior to the letter that was sent to the county attorney and the county exec, did you reach out to the Commissioner of General Services?
I did not.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah,
Thank you, Minority Leader.
Sure.
26 years, that's a pretty long time.
A lot of ups and downs, yeah.
Lots of ups and downs. Would you say that throughout, your time period here, would you say that, and without naming names, that there might have been instances where people might have come forward and had complaints and there was retaliation?
Any retaliation?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could say that.
And that tends to happen in the
I would-
political world, right?
I would agree, yeah.
So one might imagine that if there was something that was concerning or was raising red flags, that might potentially lead to the person not wanting to respond because they'd be fearful of losing their job or retaliated, correct?
I've heard that many times, yes.
Throughout your 26 years, you said you've heard that many times.
Many times.
For lots of different departments and lots of different
Yes.
situations.
Yep.
All right. When you first heard about this information, you rightfully said, and I know we've talked a lot about procedure, and I can respect the concept about procedure, but I think that it's also really important for us to recognize that while procedure is important, it does not go above serving the residents of our county. So
Yeah.
you would say that you, to the best of your ability, and the individuals that also went forward, that you spoke forward because you felt that there was something that was incorrect. That something
Possible
was-
impropriety, that's correct. It should be brought up every time anyone suspects that, as a legislator, I would say.
So my two last questions, and both of them are very much to the same questions I asked Legislator Ramos. When you first heard about these concerns, what was your initial reaction?
I wasn't actually surprised. I've heard things that compared to it in the past. But again, as a legislator, my job is to protect the taxpayers of Orange County. So that's why I got involved, I didn't do the research, I will say that. Legislator Ramos did most of this research. We've talked about it over and over. I seen it as improprieties that needed to be fixed, addressed, and repaired. And that's what we're trying to do here.
I think that something that you just said really, really struck me, and I think that anybody who's viewing this would be also concerned that you're saying 26 years as a legislator and now a minority leader, and you're saying that you are not surprised. You are not surprised that there might have been something that might be wrong. That's a really, really, I think a really important statement. That we might find that there is something wrong in our county government. That might inspire you to want to speak up, obviously, right? Since this moment, I'm sure that you've gotten a lot of calls from a lot of individuals throughout the county, people in the community. Would you feel that people that have been reaching out to you, have they shown interest in wanting to know more? Have they shown concern about what they're seeing in their county government?
I could actually say that I've been contacted by a few people that are happy that things like this are brought to light. Yes.
I think that that's also a very powerful suggestion, right? Because again, our community members unfortunately they do have concerns about how things might be sent. My last question, again, really revolves around what we've gotten, the information that we've gotten since your press conference. I'm sure you have questions, I'm sure you had answers. What now with the more information remain the questions at hand for you? What are you most concerned about? What are the things that still remain that we feel it's not just smoke, it's fire?
That's hard to say. I mean, we've heard the responses that nothing's wrong. Okay, maybe nothing's wrong, but digging deeper, not just a 2-session meetings, maybe the possibility of a whistleblower coming in and giving a reality check here that, gee, wow, we took it as nothing because it was an anonymous letter. There's other possibilities here. So to just say, oh, gee, everything's okay now, we're going to do this, and that makes it better. I'll be looking for other things that may need to be addressed as well.
Thank you, Minor.
Chairman, thank you. Just got one final question. In terms of government hiring practices, would you agree or disagree that the county hiring of even close relatives is not a prohibited practice?
Prohibited? No, it's not.
It's not. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
All good?
Yep, I'm all good, Chairman. Thank you.
All right. Do you know if the whistleblower wrote that letter? Or
Do I
is it
know
somebody
if it
different?
did? I don't know.
You don't know?
No, sir.
So it might be 2, but that's why.
It could be 10. I really don't know. I just know something was submitted that I thought might be important to the committee, and I hadn't heard it spoke about at the last meeting. Don't know if it was submitted. I don't know any of that, but I heard there was one submitted. So my question was, did anybody receive it? Because nobody's talked about it.
When did you hear that? Maybe there's another one.
When did I hear it?
Yeah.
Over the weekend.
Okay. So it's probably the same one. All right. Nobody else has anything for you? All right, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Next, I guess we could finish the Democratic caucus and go with Lori.
Everyone,
Good morning.
used to seeing all of your faces in the afternoon.
We look brighter now.
Yeah, exactly.
Song.
You want to make a statement or go into questions? What's your pleasure?
Go into questions.
Okay. Going into questions first. Anybody have questions for Lori?
I got one question, Chairman.
Okay.
Lori, how you doing today?
Good, how are you?
I'm all righty. You said at the press conference, make no mistake, this contract is in a direct violation of the public procurement policy of Orange County. The book has the procurement policy right there. Can you show us where you could cite that in there? I believe it's.
Policy is tip 4.
Yeah.
So my understanding of our procurement policy, and even in section 104B, the way I was reading it, and granted, I'm not an attorney, was that even professional services were an RFP required once we reached that threshold set forth by the state. That was my interpretation of it. Also, my interpretation of every document that was presented to me with these numerous extensions. It was originally, like we said, a contract for $65,000. And now all of a sudden, a year later, we're at $800,000. And this wasn't put to us through what I would conceive as the proper channels, us as a legislative body to review, as most contracts are. It wasn't sent out for an RFP. There was information taken off of the government website for what similar companies provide as a service. And as it was presented to me when we received the documents, these were not actual bids, but these were information that you can put on the government website. Then we didn't go with a government certified contractor. And as a person who in private practice works for a government contractor, I know the process that you go through to receive your unique ID and what you have to put out there and the documentation. And it takes several months. It's not a quick process. You don't just say, oh, here's my, tax ID, here's this, I'm ready to go. That's not it at all. You're fully vetted by the federal government to be on that website. You have to recertify yourself every year. You have to provide your documentation. You have to provide your incomes. You have to provide so much to them for them to certify you. And in my mind, we didn't get that level of prior background check, I guess would be the best comparison. And then we, as a legislative body, did not see a request for proposal. We did not see anything along those lines. I wasn't even aware that Star CIO came in behind the previous vendor. So I don't think any of us were until all of this was brought forward by the whistleblower.
Okay, I got just two quick questions after that.
Yep.
And I think you might know where we're going. Did you, prior to the press conference, have any conversations, or did you reach out to the Commissioner of General Services or the county attorney?
No, this
Okay.
was brought to me by Legislator Ramos. She had told me probably about a week before that she had had something that was brought to her. But before she presented us, she wanted to do some due diligence, some investigation and some digging, which she did. And then presented to us the information that she had. We, on a conference call, agreed on the body of the letter that you saw that's in the first page of the booklet here, pamphlet, and proceeded from there.
And my last question is, last week we had Commissioner Sam Swikata here. The county attorney has replied to your letter, and he explained, his letter explains about the procurement policy. Is it your opinion that you disagree with his opinion on the procurement policy, as well as of General Services last week, who said that she said that the procurement policy was followed in these matters? Would you agree with them or disagree with them?
That's tough for me to say. In mind, I disagree. Reading it, he's the legal mind, not me, so he should understand the legalese of this better. But the problem is, if this is part of our policy and it's correct, which I don't feel it is, then that's something we as a legislative body need to look at, and this commission needs to look at, task force rather, and go forward. That should be something that we change within our procurement policy, because I don't think it's in the best practices for us and for our taxpayers in Orange County.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Kevin Darren?
Thank you, Legislator. Just so I want to make sure that I understand correctly. So you're saying, is it the optics that you feel looks bad? That we go from 65,000 and it can balloon up to 800,000? Is the
I don't
optics?
think it's merely optics. I think that's a definite problem. That, 65,000, you're below the threshold, 3 bids, which there were none. And then once it reaches that threshold, 150,000, it goes to RFP. Never went there. So why wasn't that triggered? That should have been an automatic trigger, and it never happened for it to go to an RFP or to come before the legislative body and let us know what was going on.
So you believe that the moment that we reached an expansion that reached over $100,000, that it should have naturally come before the legislative body to analyze it, to recognize whether or not we want to move forward with it, or we want to do.
And go to an RFP. Yes.
I've heard my colleagues here at this table multiple times ask the question about process and why some department heads were not reached out. But what has not been asked is why. Why would some legislators feel uncomfortable or not want to reach out to department heads? Was there a reasoning behind that the decision not to reach out to certain individuals, or was there a reasoning behind timing? I'd like to understand that.
I believe it was the timing. I believe we felt that, with the lack of acknowledgement to our letter,
Mhm.
that, there was maybe backdooring happening, or that possibly somebody would be afraid to speak up unless they're brought before a committee and they're actually questioned on that.
Mhm.
So we went the route that we felt was the correct route in addressing it to the county executive, as he is the one who signed the contracts, the deputy county executive's office, and get the response from them. Request, you saw our letter, everybody knows what we requested in that letter.
Yeah.
And then when we received what we did receive, we reviewed it. And then at the press conference, we brought forth what our concerns were on what we reviewed.
And when you first heard about this, what was, I asked the minority as well, what was the first thing that came to your mind as you were hearing this?
Why didn't this go to an RFP?
So,
Why didn't this follow what I thought and I felt in my reading of our policy? Why didn't it trigger that? Why did it not go, once it hit that threshold? Why didn't it come before us? Why didn't it go to RFP? Why is this being hidden? That was my concerns.
Anybody else?
Just briefly, Lori, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you too.
Again, there's a lot of great discussion. Can you point out something specifically that violates our procurement policy? Tom kind of was getting into that a little, I mean, again, there's a look of impropriety, which I don't think anyone would argue with, but is there a specific that says, here's a clear, you got the response
I
from
think
Mr.
it was
Goldman?
because my understanding was that even under professional services, the way I was interpreting our policy was that once we reached that threshold, it automatically triggered an RFP.
Mhm.
Am I mistaken in that? Maybe,
Okay,
but
yeah.
in principle and in what we feel is the best practices, I still believe it should have gone to an RFP or brought to this legislative body that it exceeded that amount.
Mhm.
And why?
Fair enough, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? I have nothing, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Thanks, Lori.
Good
Thank
luck.
you, Lori.
Thank you for doing this. This is something that was definitely needed.
Legislator Nagustakis, if you're up to joining us, please. Mike has already let me know that he would like to tell us his thoughts before questions. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, legislators. Thank you for having me here. Actually, Kevin, thank you for doing this and explaining that you're actually calling the legislators here as a courtesy. And I don't know that everybody as a legislator being called here understood that. I think I did, and I appreciate that. And my opening statement, I will have about 12 minutes. Hopefully will answer many of the questions that I've, heard here. And the reason for the opening statement is to help you understand, why I went there, the reasoning behind me going there. And you're right, when you're at a press conference, you have a few minutes here. You have the ability to communicate what your thought process was. Having said that, I will read from a prepared statement. Although I usually never read from a prepared statement, I will do just that today because it is urgent that not a single word be misunderstood. In your last meeting, my name was evoked 23 times. I think it'll be useful for this committee to understand some of the reasons why I participated in the October 25th press conference. Also, while cutting through some of the deflections and attempted justifications I heard last week, I will correct some misinformation given about me. But first, excuse me. But first, I believe to understand my participation in that press conference, you need to better understand how I view public service. You may know I fought hard from 2011 to 2015 to save our county nursing home. What you may not know is that my former mother-in-law needed to be placed into a nursing home in 2012. I refused to place her in Valley View because I didn't want anyone thinking I was fighting so hard to save the facility just because my mother-in-law was in it. She received horrendous care where she was placed, and my wife eventually moved her to a different nursing home. The care there was equally horrendous. All that time, Valley View staff kept begging my wife to place her into Valley View, saying they would treat her like a queen and she would get better service than anyone else. I refused making that move and receiving preferential treatment. Valley View was finally saved in 2015 for our veterans and our seniors, and I carried out my public service to the best of my ability. In 2016, my mother-in-law passed. Largely due to the actions I just stated, in 2017, I lost my marriage. In the case that we have before us today, I was not moved by our county attorney's arguments, nor by the two testifiers last week that many relatives are employed by the county, and thus there is nothing to see here. Although I personally would never try to get a family member employed, I appreciate that others might. But to be crystal clear, it is one thing to have a family member employed in a county department at a going salary. In my opinion, it is quite another thing to have them awarded a grossly inflated sweetheart of a deal contract and many multiples of the going rate. And so I went and I spoke. I spoke at the press conference as a duly elected Orange County legislator, representing my constituents and forming the opinions I voiced based on the county attorney's documents produced in response to an inquiry by other legislators and based on the data that was brought forward by Senator Skoufis. I wondered, when I looked at online data from Zippia, the career experts, I wondered why out of 69,420 CIOs in the United States, and why out of 5,667 CIOs in our tri-state part of the country, I wondered how the only firm to be talked to and picked was that of a brother-in-law of a high-ranking county official. And so I went and I spoke. When I saw the first January 2023 contract for $65,000, I noticed it was under $100,000, so no RFP was needed. But I also noticed it was for 8 days on-site work and 64 hours or another 8 days of off-site work over 8 weeks. So based on a 5-day work week, it was for 16 days of work out of a possible 40 days. In other words, a fractional CIO working at 40% of the time. Prorated for a full year, that works out to a full-time CIO for $1,056,250 for a year. Let me repeat that. A full-time CIO for $1,056,250 for a year. I knew from my work on the Ways and Means Committee that that was an extravagant cost. I was starting to form an opinion that this was a well-thought-out plan to enrich one individual with a no-bid, inflated, sweetheart of a deal contract, and so I went and I spoke. Notwithstanding the justifications that you heard last week, that these costs and other costs that I will talk about in a moment are fair and in line with what we should be paying, my opinion is that they know better. I say this because of the deflection used last week while evoking my name. Two people claimed that if I had voted for a CIO they wanted in October of 2021, they would not have incurred these costs with Star CIO. So let's set the record straight. The administration came to Ways and Means on October 27th, 2021, asking for $175,315 of salaries for 2 full-time people, a desktop clerical support person and a CIO. Let me say it again. A full-time CIO and a full-time support person for a combined salary of $175,315 for the full year of 2022. I voted no, but their case was so weak, they couldn't get it through a Republican-controlled Ways and Means Committee. Benton voted no, Hines voted no, Kulisek voted no, Menuda voted no, Paducah voted no. Sutherland voted no. Their case was so weak, they could not get one single yes vote. Now, here's the paradox. Their case was so weak because all they did was talk about an efficient, well-oiled, smooth-running department. They could not justify the need for a CIO position. No talk at all of a department in chaos with millions of dollars of non-performing contractors since 2015 and the need for Superman to come in and save the day. So what was the truth? What we always heard in committee over the years, or what you heard last week? I wish people were testifying here under oath, and maybe we would know. It is also clear that everyone knows that the Star CIO costs were extravagant because they knew that Nassau County, a county 3 times our size, employs a full-time CIO at $145,000 a year. In addition, they knew what a very reasonable cost would be when during budget time this October, they asked for a salary of $200,000 to $225,000 to hire a full-time, full-year CIO for 2024. Because I knew that they knew these Star CIO costs were extravagant, I formed an increasingly stronger opinion that this was a well-thought-out plan to enrich one individual with a no-bid, inflated, sweetheart of a deal contract. And so I went and I spoke. My extravagant cost antenna kept rising when I saw the contract being extended over and over and over and over to a whopping $822,900 for about 9 months of fractional CIO work. Prorated for a full-time, full-year CIO, that works out to over $2 million per year. Yet no RFP, just purposeful avoidance of doing an RFP by falling back on the continuity of professional services clause. More about that in one moment. Continuity of the contract, even though the scope of work was different, the amount and titles of contract workers varied, and the contracts themselves well exceeded $100,000. Anything to keep the contract going and happily paying these extravagant costs. During the initial 8-week Star CIO contract, they did not rush to Ways and Means to try and create a new department with a full-time internal CIO to put an end to these extravagant costs. They did not rush to Ways and Means in February, nor in March, nor in April, nor in May, nor in June, nor in July. They did finally rush to Ways and Means on August 29th, maybe because a whistleblower was starting to sing. How can we know for sure? But what I do know is that my opinion grew stronger and stronger that this was a well-thought-out plan to enrich one individual with a no-bid, inflated, sweetheart of a deal contract, and so I went and I spoke. Now, in order to be able to extend the contract without an RFP, our procurement code calls for a written justification letter. The first problem was that this was not done till June 19th, well after the contract extended 2 times. And here is the second problem with the letter. According to our procurement policy, quote, the justification letter must explain how such a contract award guards against favoritism, improvidence, extravagance, fraud, and/or corruption, unquote. Let me repeat. The letter must explain how the contract guards against these vices. The letter, of course, does no such explaining. How on earth can it possibly explain away these concerns? It cannot, and it does not. All the letter does is state that it is, quote, requesting a continuity exemption with the following justification: guards against favoritism, improvidence, extravagance, fraud, and/or corruption, unquote. To me, this looked like a CYA letter, written well after the contract was extended over and over. And by now, I was convinced that my opinion was correct, and this was a plan to enrich one individual with a no-bid, inflated, sweetheart of a deal contract. And so I went and I spoke. And finally, and maybe most importantly, you heard a rant last week urging that legislators be censored and silenced, and you heard how that could be of help for one party in next year's elections. I know it is not your committee's jurisdiction, but I wanted to put on the record the profound and damaging consequences the county could face from a publicity perspective, from a legal perspective, and from a financial perspective, that the county goes down the path of trying to censor elected officials, especially when they are in the minority party, and thus trying to influence future elections. I am not a lawyer. I am an elected official who spoke and used my absolute privilege afforded me as an elected official to form opinions based on what I saw and voiced such opinions to the public and to my constituents. When I saw documents produced by Senator Skoufis, I opined that maybe an individual was in dire financial straits with their home, and maybe that explained what was going on here with these contracts. If you were not a lawyer, and if you saw this document filed on 2/3/23 from the Supreme Court of the State of New York, with the mortgage company as the plaintiff and the individual in question as the defendant, and with his home address listed as the mortgaged premises, and with the summons stating, among other things, that Westchester County, the location of the mortgaged home, is designated as the place of the trial, and in case of your failure to appear, judgment will be taken against you by default for the relief demanded in the complaint. If you had seen this document, you might have reasonably formed the same opinions about these matters when you spoke. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Can we see that document you just held up? I just don't know where it is.
You can have this document, you can give it to the
I just
clerk.
want to see if it's a document that we have, that's all. I think what we have is more than one page, isn't it?
It's the-
Yeah, we do have this. You all got it in your email?
Yeah.
It's more than one page though. And where did you get that
That's-
document?
That's the only document I have.
Who gave you that document?
That was produced by Senator Skoufis's office.
He handed that to you?
No, he did not hand it to me. I have a computer at home and I have a printer at home.
Questions for the legislator? Huh?
Thank you, Chairman. Mike, always a pleasure to sit down and talk with you, and I admire you, and you and I always have great conversations. I first want to compliment you. One of the things that I've tried to do here in the legislature since I've been here is to cut down on the paper use. And I noticed that you wrote your speech down on the back of documents that have already been printed, so hats off to you for saving those trees there.
Tom, I've been doing that for 14 years. I've been in the legislature.
I appreciate it. Trying to cut down on the paper.
It also helps my cost at, buying extra paper, and I, of course, don't want extra trees being cut
Me
down.
too. So we're on the same page with that. I'm gonna ask the questions I asked everyone else here today. The letter that was drafted, I don't think you weren't signed on to that letter.
Yeah,
Was your name on that?
Tom,
No. Quick question is,
yeah,
the response that letter was, that the letter was printed, the response from the county attorney, and last week when we had our commissioner, Sam Swikati here,
Yeah.
they both, in a letter and in her, coming and giving us the information, they're under the, they say that the procurement policy was followed. Do you agree with them or disagree with them?
thank you for the question, Tom. First of all, just to correct the record, it was stated last time that I was part of that letter or?
You're-
I'm not part of the letter. I'm not part of the
No, you're
Democratic.
not. Your name is not on that letter.
Because I was not part of the letter. But what I did was review the response back from the county attorney in response to a letter by other colleagues. And so to answer your question, no, I don't believe that the policy was followed exactly. And I think I spelled out that procurement letter mandates that certain things be done in order to be able to have a continuity of contract and in order to avoid that 100,000 trigger for RFP. What that policy needs to be done, that letter did not do, and thus the policy was not followed.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
My second question is, prior to the press conference, did you have any, did you reach out to the Commissioner of General Services about any of these matters?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the answer, but I'm going to give you color behind the answer too, which I'm sure you're going to appreciate. You know, Tom, I've been here 14 years in the legislature, a little longer than you have. I think I was here when there were big critical issues that you missed by not being here. And I've learned that quite often, especially when you go against the majority party, very often you just don't seem to get honest answers in committees. And I have personal experience with that. You know, my fight for ending free healthcare insurance, when I fought to save Valley View, with my pay-to-play law that I introduced and passed, with the illegal LDC that was set up, when I was trying to reveal the 50 million sitting at Valley View that everyone denied was there. You just didn't get straight answers at committees. And so I kind of have a second sense when I'm getting snowed. And I kind of was starting to feel that this whole situation through the committee process, I was getting snowed. And you know, if I'm not getting honest answers at committees, I'm certainly not going to solicit a one-on-one conversation. I don't think that's productive. And no, I didn't. And the second reason I didn't was because basically I decided the night before the press conference that I was going to, there would have been no time even if I wanted to make phone calls to people. But that's the full answer.
I do have, I'm sorry, I got one more question.
You can answer you can keep asking as many as you want. I enjoy your questions.
I appreciate that. You cited that one document, the legal document, and you just said here, you're not a lawyer. You might see the document and you might draw a conclusion.
Yeah.
Did you ask any lawyers? Did you say, hey, look, I have this document. It's a legal document. Can you explain to me what it means, what it doesn't mean? Or at the press conference, you talked about that, but you didn't talk to lawyer type people to say, can you explain what this document means?
Yeah. I don't know that there were lawyers at my disposal at a press conference for me to ask that question. But you know, Tom, you sit on committees, I sit on committees. A lot of times, you know, you're presented data, a lot of data, and you're asked within a couple of minutes to make a decision. Sometimes for millions of dollars of taxpayers' money, sometimes for tens of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money. And you take what is given in front of you, you look at it, you read it, you listen to what was said, and you make a decision for tens of millions of dollars in a couple of minutes. And so, yeah, I saw this document, I came to a conclusion in my head, and I spoke my opinion.
And just for the record, that document is not a notice of foreclosure on a house.
I'm not a lawyer, I have no idea.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, you did have a lawyer at the press conference, Assemblyman Jacobson was standing right behind you.
I don't talk to Assemblyman Jacobson very often.
Okay. Kevin Dare?
Before I have questions for the legislator, Betsy, would you be able to explain for the viewers and anybody here in the room who maybe not familiar what that letter is, what it actually is?
I have not seen the document that Mr. Nagustak has just passed around.
It was a letter that was forwarded to all legislators last week.
I don't know if that was the same thing that he passed around right now. I don't have it in my possession.
The committee may have.
Well, that's only one page of it.
I understand.
I believe 3 or 4 page document.
That's the only page I saw in half.
And this is the only document that was suggested was could be seen as something against a mortgage. What exactly is that kind of document?
This is a summons.
Okay.
Generally, a summons is accompanied by a complaint.
Okay.
This is publicly available if you go on the New York State ECF filings. This is a one-page document. The complaint is not included in this, so.
In the full document that we received, do we have, was there more information about what that summons was about?
Yes,
Could you give us details about?
I did provide that to the committee members upon request. The complaint noted that the mortgage company assigned its benefits to another mortgage company. There was an incorrect filing of one of the mortgages with the clerk's office. Because of that, after both of the mortgages were paid in full, that is actually one of the paragraphs in the document itself, in the complaint. The new company that had been assigned the benefits tried to file a satisfaction of lien with the clerk's office, but the clerk's office would not accept it because of the incorrect filing. And I believe the incorrect filing was missing a page on the second mortgage. So the company, and this again is public information, if you just read the document, it is pretty self-explanatory. I believe the complaint itself was about 2.5 pages long, and it was about 13 paragraphs. I don't think any of the paragraphs were longer than 2 sentences. But it did say that NationStar, the assigned company, tried to file the satisfaction of lien. They were denied that ability by the clerk's office because there was the incorrect filing of the second mortgage. So they decided to file it's a summons and complaint, and it notes that the defendants are named solely for notice purposes because they reside at the mortgaged property. And what they asked for in the judgment was that the court would issue an order stating that I believe the language was that that the court would issue an order stating that the mortgage was paid in full and directing that the Westchester County Clerk's Office accept a certified copy of that so that the satisfaction of lien could be properly filed with the clerk's office. And that is essentially the information I provided to the
If
committee.
something was paid for, how could it be foreclosed upon?
There's no indication that that document has anything
That's
to
not
do
a
with a
foreclosure
foreclosure.
document, it's fine, but in that other documentation that you reference, it says paid in full. So-
It's part of that document. That's just the
part of
first
that.
page of it. But like I said, that's the summons. The summons generally is the first page of a summons and complaint. The complaint lists the allegations in full. And so in this instance, if you read, I believe it was paragraph 9 of the complaint that stated that the mortgage was paid in full
On the second page.
on the second page.
Right.
Who was asking the questions? I think,
Kevin Darren.
yeah, you have.
Again, same line of question. First off, thank you, legislator, for taking the time, and as all the legislative for coming forward. I asked a minority leader question. In 26 years, you know, have you ever experienced or felt anything that felt strong? You kind of alluded to a lot of that during your years. Would you say that was also part of the process of why you felt compelled to speak forward, to speak up and to come forward?
Sure, thank you for the question. Just want to make sure all legislators hear the answer.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you for the question. No, I haven't been here 26 years. I've only been here 14 years, thankfully. But I've gone through, and I did talk about them, major issues that, yes, have left a mark on my brain, telling me that sometimes you will get stonewalled, especially if you're going against the party in power. Sometimes you will get stonewalled. Sometimes you will not be given truthful answers. Sometimes you will be lied to. You know, may I be struck down if I wasn't fighting for 2 years to reveal that Valley View had $50 million of taxpayers' money sitting there in its funds and was told over and over, no, 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 nothing there, nothing there, nothing there. That leaves something on you. It leaves a thought that, you know what, sometimes when there's contentious issues, you are just going to be lied to, and you sometimes have to take a path that is different than the norm. Every legislator is allowed to pursue public policy the way he sees best fit for the public. And I've learned that under certain circumstances, the best way to move forward is to have as much light shown on an issue as possible for the public to see it. And eventually, hopefully, the truth will come out. That the 50 million is at Valley View, that the LDC is illegal, that Valley View's books are not correct. Eventually, the light shown on the issue will expose the truth behind it. And I felt that was the best course of action here.
Yeah, Michael, good to see you this morning.
Thank
I
you,
remember when
Rob.
I
Nice to
first
see you
came
too.
on the legislature, I did, if you recall our conversation, I did say I respected and admired your fight for Valley View.
I do. I remember that conversation.
Formidable, and I followed it as we all did in the
Yep.
newspapers, so I always remember that, and I know Michael, you're very passionate
Yep.
in what you do, and I have asked the other folks the same question, and you did reference in there more specifically where you believe there was a violation of our procurement
Yep.
policy. Could you just go back and reiterate that? Do you have it handy? I know there was
I
a
do. I can.
section in there that was referring to a letter required to substantiate why we're extending that contract.
Bear with me one second.
Mhm.
I do, and I can actually read it again.
Yeah.
And it's very simple to me. And again, my conclusion was, by that time, I was convinced that I needed to talk. And the reason was, the only way you could move forward with this process, the way the county attorney outlined correctly in his letter, that this was, quote, being done the right way. The only way it could be done the right way is if you followed our procurement policy and what it is trying to get at. And the policy, and I will read it again, states, quote, the justification letter, which is the only way they could move forward without an RFP, the justification letter must explain how such a contract award guards against favoritism, improvidence, extravagance, fraud, and/or corruption, unquote. And as I stated, the letter does no such thing. You cannot justify that you're guarding against favoritism and extravagance based on, in my opinion, what I read to you, I was seeing in front of me. You cannot justify that. And the letter, of course, does no such explaining, as I said. It can't possibly explain that away. So what the letter just does is it restates the exact things that it needs to do. That is not what is required by our policy. And thus, in my opinion, they failed to correctly do the procedure to move forward without an RFP.
So you conclude that it was favoritism and extravagance based on the procurement policy, in your opinion?
In my opinion.
Okay. Michael, you serve on Ways and Means still?
I do.
Yeah. Had you brought any of this up prior to this? The press conference?
What exactly?
Well, I mean,
Should I bring up?
had you spotted anything prior to this that would have raised concerns months back, a year back with Star?
I'm
Was there
confused
any-
by,
was there
I'm
anything-
confused by the question, since I hadn't, I don't
Okay,
think
so
any of
well,
us had an idea.
on the
that there
October
was-
25th press conference, everything
Yeah.
came out.
Yeah.
Prior to that, sitting on Ways and Means, had anything come before you that would have raised a red flag for you to question?
My recollection is, I don't know that I've ever heard that Star CIO was a contracted company with a fractional CIO that we were employing.
Mhm.
My recollection is that I never heard that on any committee.
Also, the letter that you produced, there's not a foreclosure notice, and I just verified that with counsel there too. I mean, my other hat is as a Realtor. I did check, because I have access to the Westchester County Tax Department through the multiple listing service. There was no foreclosure, list pendants, or anything on that particular property. And I think, reading that documentation, that oftentimes mortgage companies sell off the mortgages. So you may have gotten your loan through Hudson Valley Credit Union, but then they sold it to someplace out in the Midwest, who then sold it someplace in California, who then sold it to somebody else. But it may be a case where that fell through the cracks there. So, I mean, it takes a while to foreclose on property in New York State. So that may have been just, something thrown out there. And Michael, just for full disclosure, you're an honest guy, you're straightforward. In what capacity do you work for Senator Skoufis? What exactly do you do for him? I can ask.
My official title is I'm Senior Advisor to Senator James Skoufis.
Okay. And in your opinion, politics are not involved in this? Can I ask you that? I mean, I want to remove Democrat and Republican labels.
I'm not quite sure where you're going with the question.
Do you believe there are any
But
political motivations in this?
but I never, and that's all I'm speaking here, is from my perspective. I never introduced politics into anything, okay?
Mhm.
I don't care whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent. I always attempt to do what I think is best for the people, to such a degree that even when it's my own party that I was in for the first 10 years of my career in this legislative body, if I thought they were doing wrong, I would fight against my own party to do what's right for the people. Politics should never be involved in public service.
Right. So you're saying, no, yeah, I mean, you've always been kind of that maverick, and I do admire that in you. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to just actually compliment you on that. You have always been, in my years here as a legislator, a very independent thinker. And all the legislators I've had the pleasure of working with on this body, you know, between our conversations, between, you know, the things that you've led on, you've always led with the best interests of the county residents.
Thank you.
And so I want to applaud you not only for the time that I've had the chance to work with you, but in the years that you've been here. And for, once again, doing it to the best of your ability, to your knowledge, trying to lead in that same capacity. During the past press conference, you made a comment in regards to a Ways and Means meeting, in which it was discussed, IT was discussed, but that this position was not brought forward. Do you remember that comment?
I do.
Could you perhaps just reiterate what that comment was referring to? Because as I remember, I too do not recall at that time ever hearing anything about Star CIO or any Superman or Superwoman being needed at that time. And so, you know, if we were able, and I think that we have a lot of fiscal conservatives here, you know, not just at this table, but in this legislature, that would have liked to avoid spending nearly $800,000. You know, I'm curious, you know, was that brought up at any point?
Sure. I think you're referring to the August 29th Ways and Means Committee meeting. And if you remember in my prepared statements, I said, you know, again, why I came to the conclusion this was an extravagant contract that they knew was an extravagant contract, but did not want to do anything about it, was because they never did rush to Ways and Means to create a new department, to get an internal CIO throughout the months of January and February, March and April and May and June and July. But in August, on August 29th, yes, they did come to the committee. And my general recollection was that, you know, yes, you know, it's a different environment that we're in. Yes, cybersecurity is very difficult. And yes, now we need to split and have a separate IT department. And yes, now we need to bring in a CIO. That was the general talk that I remember. There was no specific mention that we already had a partial fractional CIO with Star CIO working for us. There's no talk about that. And so, yes, it was also brought up last week. I voted against that happening because they came before the committee and wanted a blank check given to them. They had no budget numbers. They had no information as to what the cost of all this would be. And I never, ever will vote for anything with a blank check. So I was against that. But I did say the concept of splitting it to a different department and bringing an internal CIO, I thought was a good idea. But I had no idea we're paying upwards of $800,000 for fractional CIO work, which would prorate out to over $2 million a year. I had no idea that was going on. Certainly, I would have voiced stronger opinions in the committee had I known that was going on. But at that point, August 29th, the administration, and I don't know whether it was, like I said in my prepared statement, a whistleblower that was starting to ruffle feathers that forced them to make a move, but they did make a move, and I'm glad they made a move. And then they eventually came in August through the budget process, in October, through the budget process, and asked for $200,000 to $225,000 for a full year, full-time CIO. So I think that's a good thing. I think that press conference may have helped that occur. But I'm not sure what your original question was, but I think it was evident to everyone that looks at it that you're paying an extravagant cost for what you were paying for. And you know that's a fact when they're saying all we need is 200 to 225,000 to accomplish the job. So yeah, that occurred on August 29th.
Thank you.
That's it? Yep. Good, Rob? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Hey, next, I think Alicia would be next on our list. Want to join us?
Take a break.
You want a break?
5-minute break.
All right, we'll take a 5-minute break for the public. I'll leave the camera on, but turn the sound off. And just with respect to the order, we'll hear from Alicia D'Amico, Director of Cost Control, and our Deputy County Executive, Harry Poor, and then we'll have Rick Golden close us out for the day. And we're going to take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay, we are back. It's 11:01 and we're going to start here a presentation from our Director of Cost Control, Alicia D'Amico. Do you want to tell us what your thoughts are and you want us to ask you questions? What's your opinion?
I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Okay. Great. Anybody want to go first?
Tom likes to go first.
No, I-
Oh,
All right, I'll go first if you're not all raising your hand. Can you pass this down to Alicia, please? This is information that came in from the county attorney's office since our last meeting. And a lot of it has to do with you and your conversations and emails and things like that. So I'm going to reference some of that with you.
Sure.
So it looked to me from the emails, and at first I'll ask you, I already know the answer and you probably saw the presentation, but how did you come up with Star CIO as someone you might be interested in speaking to?
I had a conversation with Langdon Chapman, and I asked him for a recommendation for an IT experienced, high-level consultant that can give me a very quick assessment.
Did he tell you had to hire him, or how did that go?
No. We were in my office. He was standing in my office at the doorway. It was a quick conversation, probably about 6 minutes. And I asked, I was explaining my IT concerns, and just as I said, I asked him for a very high-level experienced IT consultant that can turn around a quick assessment. Said nothing. He either had his iPad or his telephone with him. He starts typing away. He comes over, hands me the iPad or the telephone and says, read about him. Let me know what you think. So I had 2 book jackets that from Driving Digital and Digital Transformation. And then I had an About Me, about Isaac Sokolic and Star CIO. Took a couple of minutes just to read that. My actual reaction to it was I said to Langdon, you know this guy? And he didn't say anything. And I turned around and I said, why have you never brought this person to my attention before? And again, it's not verbatim, but it's paraphrasing. I just was very surprised he never brought him to my attention before. He said, Alicia, take your time, look online. If you're interested, I'll let him know that you'll be reaching out. And he walked out of my office. If it was a 6 to 7 minute conversation, it was a lie.
And did he let you know it was a relative or
No,
close friend?
no, not at that moment. No, not at all.
Okay.
And so for the next couple of days, I went into a deep dive on Star CIO and Driving Digital Transformation. I went on to his YouTube. I checked out a lot of his interviews. He had massive platforms that he was on, that he was interviewing with other IT professionals and CIOs around the world. He did podcasts with other people. He was on .tv. I checked his blogs. He blogs for CIO.com and Infotech, which are very 2 reputable blogs. It's not anybody who can get their information up there. It's really a go-to resource for IT professionals. Isaac Sokolic and Star CIO, after going through and reading everything, he's a teach the teacher. So he's a level of a mentor that comes in and mentors CIOs. He had 20 years experience of an IT professional as a CIO, a CTO, and for me, from an executive level, he knows digital transformation. That's his business. Why is that important for the county? Because we need to move in automation at the end of the day. It's not about whether we're going to do it. He's a private sector digital transformation specialist. That's what he does. It's very specialized. It's new. People throw these terms around, but his business is built on digital transformation. County has to move towards automation. We have to look at that. We have to have an eye towards it. So here I have a 20-year CIO, CTO specializing in digital transformation. I'm interested. So that was it. Didn't wait. It was probably a couple of days, a week later. I have no idea. Mr. Chapman's walking out of the county exec's office. I jump up from my desk. I go in the hallway and I said to him, hey, I'm reaching out to Star CIO. Impressive. He turns around, he looks at me. He said, he's my brother-in-law. Hire him, don't hire him. Don't talk to me about him again from this point forward. I said, great. Went back to my desk. That was the end of the conversation. Never spoke to him about it again.
Okay. In that package I just handed you, there's emails back and forth. You might not even need to reference it because you might remember, but it looks like you first, I guess you said November 28th, 2022, you sent a email to Mr. Sokolic basically saying, I'm reaching out, we should talk, something of that nature. Is that about the right time frame? November 28th, or did you speak to him before that?
No, never. That was the first initial contact, and that was after, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks after I spoke with Langdon. I'm not sure.
And then it looks like he responded to you somewhere around December 2nd,
Correct.
saying thanks for reaching out. And then December 9th, it looks like you asked him for an organization chart.
No, he asked, well, I wanted an organization chart for him to understand the layout of our department. Are we looking at December 9th, the one that said to Sam Swikata from me?
Let's see, I think there's a few on the 9th. Well, you tell me, you wanted his org chart or he wanted
No,
yours?
no, he wanted ours. He was,
Okay.
again, he's coming in, I'm dealing with him as a professional service. I want the decent quote coming in that I'm able to provide over to the commissioner.
Okay.
So, yes,
And then he looks like he gave you a proposal that included an interim and fractional CIO, training to stakeholders, and an advisory program.
yes, just tell me which one you're looking at so I can reference it for a second, but that's absolutely
Well-
right. He came in with 3 different proposals, which vendors tend to do, yes.
Yeah, so it would have been, again, December 9th. There's a bunch of emails back and forth. So is that what we were looking for as a county, those 3 services?
No, we weren't looking for all that. We needed a quick turnaround. We needed a quick assessment and a roadmap. And so what we were looking for was the 2-month, getting somebody as a 2-month individual. And I want to be clear with this because we really did need somebody coming in for a quick oversight. And that was the intent when this all came into play. You're not going to get an out of school, or I should say newly CIO or a mid CIO level that's going to come in for 2 months or offer 2 months, get a fire hose of information that's coming at you, because he's not just coming in to look at one program. He's looking at the county. He's looking at everything. It's a moment in time. We're having issues. We need them addressed. So this is not something that comes with somebody who's, going to be a mid-level CIO. This guy has to be able to come in and digest all that information and be able to put out an assessment and recommendation. The benefit for me with Isaac is that he's not only going to come in and give an assessment as a CIO, CTO, with the 20 years what Sam was going to need for the management of the day-to-day, he's looking at it with an eye to the future. So instead of just getting a CIO that's coming in quickly and looking at everything across the board, he's coming in and saying, okay, we're going to get you to operational standard, but with an automation view. So instead of just putting something in and saying, hey, this is working, this isn't working, it's, hey, what do we need to do to move this forward? What's a different way of putting in this platform that's going to, work for us going forward? Automation is key.
Okay, so out of those, you only wanted program 1 then, interim
That's
fractional
all we're
CIO,
looking for,
not the other 2
$65,000.
pieces?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
And then on December 12th, it looks like you sent Star CIO what you call a DGS-IT support metrics.
Right.
Which I guess it looks like the list of issues that your computer department is dealing with.
No, not at all. That's just providing the metrics of the county and what we look like, how many users we have, how many buildings we have in the county, how many servers, how many workstations, just so he understands what he's walking into.
Okay, and you can give him that without a contract?
Yeah, this was all, yes, we do that with plenty of vendors, sure. Help desk and stuff like that so that people understand, right?
Because you probably find it funny to know that the county attorney redacted it from us. We can't see the information,
That's because we don't want to put that information out publicly.
but you gave it to someone you didn't even have a contract with, is my point. So county legislators can't see it, but somebody that you never met can have it?
Well, we gave it to him because I needed him to have a solid quote that came back. It's not something we wanted to put public.
But how do you know it's not gonna go public if you never met the individual?
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, we were told not even to share it with fellow legislators. That's how sensitive the county attorney's office thought it was.
I'm trying to think though, I think that, okay, I'll leave it at that.
You're gonna get your turn. Bring it to me when you come up. Now, December 13th, it says here you wanted a meeting with contracted CISO What is that?
Cyber Information Security Officer. That's Andy Lynn from UTC, who is overseeing our cybersecurity through the UTC.
Is that person still here?
Yes,
And that person oversees cybersecurity?
correct.
Okay, and so did you have that meeting with the three of you?
No, I was not included on that meeting. That was the commissioner and Andy.
The commissioner, meaning Commissioner Swycata?
Correct, yes.
Why wouldn't you be part of that?
Just because it was the day-to-day. I was interested in Isaac from a level of from the executive branch for automation and digital transformation. Honestly, I wanted Sam to be able to assess herself for the day-to-day and whether or not there would be, a synergy.
But you're still an integral part of our computer system, aren't you?
Not really. I go down
You
again
always come
from the
before the
executive level.
legislature and tell us that, we need so much money because we're, protecting, this is a positive statement, trust me, that, we have to protect ourselves. That's always seems to be coming from you.
Well, of course, from the executive branch, it's always an oversight and it's an interest for me. I'm always aware of that. But once I came up into the county exec's office, it's a piece of many things that I'm overseeing now since April 2022. But it is an important piece of the puzzle for sure.
Okay. Now, at some point in this document, I gotta find it, and you can keep scrolling through with me. Here, I have mine marked. It's dated, it looks like a proposal from Star CIO, came to you via email, to you personally on December 20th.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm referring to, on that document would be page 2. And it talks about recommended programs for Orange County at the very top, and then you see some pricing. The 4-page document.
Yes, this page, right here?
Yes. Now, that had prices of an 8-week program of 65,000. Then it talked about an advisory program of 100,000. Driving Digital Center of Excellence program, 285,000 for a total of 450. Now, was that a choice or options, or is that something you had asked him for?
Yeah, no, those were just options. Those were just different things. Our focus was on number one. It was on number one. It was the transformational leader for the 8 weeks for the 65,000. And I'm sorry, am I also to point out on number one, if you could see, it says Isaac Sokolic would deliver the service with a mix of on-site virtual work over a month-to-month program and transition responsibilities when a permanent CIO is identified. We were very upfront that this was a short contract. It was intended to be a short contract.
Got that, but nobody asked us for a CIO until August, and this contract started in January. So how was it gonna be so short?
Because we were hoping that a deputy commissioner was going to be coming in place. We did not know whether or not we were going to be separating the department or if we were going to be putting a deputy commissioner in place. We were just trying to fill a gap. We had no technical expertise we had an outgoing commissioner and an incoming commissioner with no technical expertise, no deputy commissioner in place with no technical expertise. We needed somebody at the helm.
Right, and as a matter of fact, I think Commissioner Swycata pointed that out, where you had actually hired somebody and they dropped out, is that right? Didn't something like that happen?
Yes.
Do you remember when that was?
Probably, I think, no, I would be lying if I told you right now the timeline. I'm not sure.
And now, looking all the way back in the other book, not the document you have in front of you, but that binder,
Mhm.
I'm going to take you to contract 1, which is under tab 2.
Okay.
A lot was made of, did you see the press conference in front of the building? Did you get an opportunity to watch
I
that?
did about 2 weeks later, yes.
All right, so the first page in that section under tab 2, where it says "Rush, please" on top. Do you know who wrote that?
No.
Now, do you know who hired Star CIO? Was it you? Was it the commissioner? Who said we choose Star CIO?
At the end of the day, that's Commissioner Swycata. I provided her with a quote, but it falls underneath procurement.
So do you have like a scoring system or a meeting where you meet with the executive branch and computer for some position at that level?
No,
So the Commissioner of General Services chose Star CIO.
yeah,
Now, would it have been your role or Commissioner Swaycada's role to like negotiate pricing and things like that?
All falls underneath Commissioner Swaycada.
So in the document in front of you that says rush, please.
Yep.
You'll look down about 4 lines. It says lead negotiator for the county. That's your name.
Right.
Is that an incorrect statement?
No, it's lead/negotiator. I was the lead on the contract, on the contact.
So do you know if the contract was ever negotiated?
I do not believe it was ever negotiated, no.
Does that seem strange to you?
It depends. No, not really. It depends.
My experience with Commissioner Burpo was I don't think he ever came before us without bragging about having negotiated something.
Understood.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Understood, yeah. It
So
was,
that would not have been your role to negotiate this contract,
no,
even though your name appears under negotiator.
it's lead/negotiator. I was the it's on every single contract. You can see it with different people. Sometimes the contact, sometimes they negotiate. But from what I understand, it falls underneath the Department of General Services to do that.
Well, why do you think Sam wrote your name there or somebody wrote your name there?
Because I was the lead, I was the contact. It's not lead negotiator. It's lead/negotiator for county.
You're the lead contract, but you don't have the authority to hire the person.
No, I was just the person who was in contact back and forth. It wasn't that I didn't have the authority to hire the person. It was somebody that I thought was interested. I got the quote and I passed it along to the Commissioner of Procurement.
I'm just shocked by the answer. I thought that the executive branch would be involved in the decision-making of someone of that, caliber. It's a big job.
Well, I did get the quote. I thought it would be an excellent addition for us, but it wasn't where I told Sam she had to hire him.
Do you know if somebody else told her to hire?
No, why would you ask that?
Did somebody else say, hey, you should pick this person?
No,
Okay.
yeah, no.
All right. Anybody else? Rob?
Alicia, thanks for being here, by the way. I appreciate your time. Just step back for a second. You had mentioned quick assessment roadmap. Under what circumstances were you driven to seek more IT help? What was going on in the county? That you said we need to hire someone, which ended up being Star.
Correct.
What was going on?
We had the outgoing commissioner, we had an incoming commissioner, without, as I mentioned, no technical expertise. We didn't have a deputy commissioner in place with technical expertise. We had concerns with vendors. We had concerns with on-site resources that were in place. We had failing projects that were being brought up to the level of the county exec from different department heads and deputies. So there was just a number of things that was going on.
And you felt the roadmap that you mentioned or assessment would have been a short term. So legislator Hines, Chairman Hines had mentioned the gap between January and by the time this was finally finalized, there would be a short-term stopgap measure just to get the house in order. Would that be fair to say?
That's exactly correct.
But it went further than we had anticipated, and then other things have since happened since then.
Correct.
Okay. But it wasn't, I think that's a good point. It wasn't negotiated. It was just, do you feel it was an emergency situation that something had to be put in place?
Well, we had failing projects. We had vendor concerns. And so one of the questions was that there was a vendor in place already. The point was that vendor was the one that was in concern. We wouldn't have that person doing an assessment on themselves.
Okay, and that's UTC.
Correct.
And to date, it looks like UTC has collected in excess of $8 million from Orange County.
Probably.
So,
something around that,
but
I'm sure.
UTC is still a vendor to the
Correct.
county?
Correct. Again, when we have, this is not out of the ordinary. If you have a failing vendor in the county, they're usually brought to the table. There's usually a discussion on how we can remediate, what we need to do. We've done that. That's what part of that was done with Star CIO, assessing everything when they came in, and that's what we did. So yes, they're still a part of the county.
Okay, thank you.
I want to bring it to the continuing letter, which is almost it is the last page in the spiral book in front of you. So this is information we just got. Last week, I had asked Commissioner Swaycada about the June 19, 2023 continuing
Chairman, can I
exemption
interrupt
letter.
you for just a second? In the new information.
It's a
New information, last
Not the
page.
binder.
Oh, I'm sorry. I put it in my binder. It's my fault. I put it in my binder. So it's the last page in the packet I handed you.
Yes.
All right, so the only new information is that now it appears, originally it had nobody signing it, now it's Sam Tricata signed it and you signed it as well. June 19th, 2023. What's the significance of that date? If any?
I have no idea. I don't know why you're asking the question. I'm not sure.
I'll tell you why, because the first contract talked about a 2-month period starting in January, right?
Yep,
And it was I think it was a 6-month contract, the first one. When the contract one is in the book, if I guess we can refer to it. On the same page. Contract one is under tab 2,
yep,
and the dates are 1/15/23 to 7/14/23, about a 6-month period. Right, the top of the page?
yes, see it.
But everybody wants to talk about 2 months, so that's what I'm trying to clear up.
Oh, 6 months then.
The contract is 6 months, yeah, but
Okay.
we're talking a 2-month period for the 65,000, right?
Correct.
Okay, so the letter is dated in June. I'm just curious as to why that was generated on that date. And you might say you don't know. I don't know.
I
You
don't
might
know.
not
I don't know
Okay.
why it was generated.
So somebody handed that to you and said, sign this?
Correct.
Okay, and you didn't ask why?
No, I read it. I knew that the continuity would be coming. This didn't happen in a vacuum. We had a number of meetings with this. The deputy county executive, we had that with the county attorney. This is something that I knew would be coming, but the date just doesn't, I don't know what the date is.
So I see you as one of the computer people in the county, even though you got promoted out of that, I understand. And you know the cost of computer services, because you always tell us.
Sure.
So I refer you to tab 3 in the binder.
Yep.
And you'll see the invoices.
So just so you know, this is day to day. This comes out of the procurement department. Happy to go through it, but again,
No, I know.
okay,
I just want, I'm making a point here, I think, and you're gonna tell me if I did or not. The first invoice, $32,000, February 8th, 2023, down payment. Okay, and you can keep turning the pages.
Okay.
Then we have April 3rd, 2023, $32,500, payment to for work ending 3/21/23. Right?
yep,
Okay, so that's your 8 weeks.
yes,
Okay, now you have another payment on April 3rd. $32,500 down payment auto renewal beginning 3/22/23. Auto renewal.
yes,
Then we go to May 3rd, 2023, $32,500, 50% of 8-week auto renew. May 3rd, 2023.
correct.
That brings us to 130,000 by May, still no continuing agreement signed, right?
Okay,
Because
gotcha. I got your numbers.
And then in June, the continuing agreement is signed. And then the second contract, I guess, kicks in July 13th, it appears that was signed.
Okay. I was not aware of, I don't know the timing. I don't know the dates on this, on the invoices and stuff. All I know is what Commissioner Sokata said at, last week was that, she was able to renew for 2-month periods or, in increments of 2-month periods until she hit underneath the 100,000.
But you're not aware of the rules of the continuing letter? We'll ask somebody else those questions.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely underneath the, Commissioner of General Services.
And the payments go on, but I'm just concerned about that, because the date seems quite arbitrary to me, in June, based on all these checks coming out. And I don't think Commissioner Scoicata was able to pinpoint why that date was chosen either. And I guess we could ask her again. Now, you know IT, you know the cost of it. Did you think Mr. Sokolok services were going to be $65,000 in total?
I didn't know when the quote came in, but I sat and I knew that we would be paying premium for that specialized experience to be at the town and for the time period.
But you-
Because we were asking for 2 months at 65,000, yeah, sure. I
But did you think
understand.
he was going to be done in 2 months?
With what we wanted, if he had actually came in for the 2 months to do what we needed him to do, absolutely. We were looking for a roadmap and a quick assessment, and he had that done. He's pulled things together pretty quickly for us. Yes,
So you thought he was in and out for 65,000?
we both did. That was the intent. That was the actual intent the entire time, was to just get him in here. It was a gap. It was a fill gap.
Okay, anybody else? Kevin Darren?
Thank you again, for coming.
Sure.
So I have a host of questions, but before I get into those, as the chairman alluded, we all tend to kind of look at you as the computer expert. And that has actually been also passed on also by the commissioner who in the last week meeting specifically said that on computer matters, she really, looks to you for that kind of information. So it's not just us that look at you for your expertise on that, but also the commissioner. That is an important factor, but it's also makes it a little bit confusing for us when we heard that you were not part of the negotiation process. In trying to, for us to know like what numbers actually really work for this kind of position. That's my first point. My second point was, we previously had a legislator here who said that at an August meeting, there was no mention of a star CIO. And so, we saw that in previous months, having a full-time person, having I think it was an assistant, was a little bit less than 200,000, 170,000, I think it was. Here we are ballooning substantially more than that. And you and your experience can see, what the costs are. Would you say that there was a moment where you were like, wow, that we're really getting way beyond the amount of money that this is like a normal rate?
No,
So this was not, this price seemed always acceptable to what?
I think it was it's being taken out of context with the moment of what the department was dealing with at that time.
Mhm.
My concern at the end of the day was going to be the consequences of the cost if we didn't have it in place.
Okay. Was there a reason why that in that August meeting, the star CIO position or the work that was being done wasn't brought to the Ways and Means Committee?
I don't recall. I don't know why. There was no reason. I mean, it wasn't done intentionally.
The reason why I asked is because the way that it was presented, it sounded like there was a fire in this department and we really needed to really address a dire concern. And by the mix of it saying, okay, we didn't have a deputy and we didn't have this and we didn't have that, it definitely sounds like there was a pressing need. But that pressing need would also, for my purposes, I would think that you would want to bring this before the legislature so that they could actually put money in and help address that. So my concern is that was, none of the legislators in Ways and Means had any idea of what was already happening, number one. And then number two, that there was no way for them to be able to help address your concerns.
There was no reason. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but at that time, there wasn't a reason that it needed to be brought to your attention. It wasn't done intentionally at all. That was not the intent. And the department that you voted upon with the positions and everything were put in place by Star CIO. He's the one who was creating that and to get the CI description in place for us as well.
When you were going, so you had already mentioned that Mr. Chapman was the one who presented the name, and you did your due diligence, you reached out, you asked them. You mentioned that one of the big things I think that Commissioner Sokala also mentioned, that one of the things that was a great feature was that they were going to be able to go on site. And kind of give it like that's more in one-on-one feel. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you able to get that information from others? That kind of whether emails or communication with other departments or other agencies about similar kinds of.
I handed over the December 20th quote. Prior to that, probably in October or November, I was speaking, well, I shouldn't say, I don't remember if it was myself or if it was the director of systems integration, Lane Hunt, with Gartner for service advisory.
Okay. And did you ask similar questions about whether or not they'd be able to go one-on-one and to your best of your knowledge?
No, I can't recall.
Do we have any emails, anything like that show any communications between you and any other agencies that might be negotiating?
I have the one for the Gartner, yes.
Okay, all right. And did you, and it was similar questions like the ones that were asked to Star CIO, would you be able to come on site? Would you be able to?
I don't recall. I have to get the attachments to it. Not sure.
One of the other things that were mentioned is that there were some quotes taken out from a database, and from what I understand, that seems to be a pretty, common thing. However, one of the comments that have come out over the last couple of weeks by legislators is that they're concerns about the kind of the special attention that this particular contract was given over others, because of the relationship between. There's to your knowledge, there was no reason, or no special treatment given to this particular contract.
No,
To your knowledge, is it a violation of county policy to mix GSA quotes while piggybacking with non-GSA quotes?
that I defer to my procurement department on that. I rely on law and I rely on procurement.
Did you see the recent Mid Hudson News about the 2016 RFP by any chance?
Did not.
I was just curious. There was very similar services, even though Star CIO's contract was not put out for bid. Were you involved in 2016 RFP by any chance? Do you recall?
Oh, probably, sure.
Why was that put out to bid, but Star CIO's wasn't?
I don't know. I don't know what we're referencing. I don't know the contract. I don't know anything about that, so I have to follow up.
Okay. One of the other things that came up in the last meeting was about signing off on certain things, whether it's the county executive versus deputy county executive. How frequently would you say you sign off on things on behalf of the county executive, deputy county executive?
Couldn't give you a number. It's whenever those folders come onto my desk. And they're at my desk, it means that I need to sign them.
But it's a regular occurrence.
Whenever I have the county exec out or Harriet's out, those folders come on my desk to be signed.
So it is a regular occurrence.
Yeah, I guess at times. It depends. Yeah.
Would you say once a month, 10 times a month?
I wouldn't, I don't know, twice a month maybe, if that much. Yeah, not sure.
And kind of going back to the concept about the negotiation, so you were not part of negotiating the price down, trying to find ways that we might be able to get a better number on for this particular contract at any point?
No.
Okay. I will just end by just putting on record that one of the big things that stood out for me with our testimony with Commissioner Torquato was she specifically said that you were the one who had been leading on the negotiation on for that particular contract. And so that's another aspect of that brings a little bit of concern to me. So just kind of knowing like.
But can I just clarify, when you say leading negotiation, I did all the due diligence, I put everything together, I had a quote, and I presented it over to the Commissioner of Soikata. What is, I'm trying to understand.
So perhaps this is my word of using the word lead. I meant negotiating the price in general.
Oh, no.
And that was actually, and so my apologies for the use of the word lead.
That's okay.
Because you've very much made it clear that lead, but I meant negotiating the price. So
No.
one of the things that, we're seeing such a huge ballooning price, something that starts at $65,000. Many have alluded to the fact that having a full-time position would bring us, somewhere between 135 to 200,000. In the budget, we budgeted for somewhere between 200 to 220,000. Here we have a price tag that could lead up to $800,000, which is a pretty astronomical number for those of us who know very little about computer technology. For you with much more expertise, that might actually be a completely normal number. Again, so you were not part of the negotiation of trying to bring down that number to see if we can get something better or compare it to something better in other.
No.
And to your knowledge, who would a person who had been negotiating that number would be?
It would be the Commissioner of General Services.
Thank you.
Tom? Thank you, Chairman. Hi, Alicia.
Hey, Tom.
How you doing today?
Okay.
Good. I got a couple questions here. I wrote them down. God, my penmanship is terrible. Number one, did HR Commissioner Chapman any way pressure you, direct you in any shape, way, or form, or coerce you into hiring Star CIO?
Absolutely not.
Number two, we had just talked about this phrase here. It says lead, and then there's a big slash, negotiator for the county. Your name's underneath that. Is that something that you would say is very uncommon, common, happens? Is your name on more than one contract that way?
Sure.
Okay. Also, on this one contract here, I don't know if you have that page open, it's the contract that is dated 1/15/23. It says rush please on the top. Is that something that you would say is common, uncommon?
It's common.
Okay. All right, I got mine. Third question, the continuity letter for the situation, is that something, because, people might be watching, I mean, even me, is this something that is common or uncommon in government business, to have a continuity letter attached to a contract?
It's common.
Okay.
The continuity letter, and again, Commissioner Soikata can speak to this, the continuity letter is like a permission letter. And then the contract follows.
Couple more questions. To your knowledge, was the procurement policy adhered to regarding these contracts?
Absolutely.
And I have a couple more questions, but I'll go to my last question first, but at the end of all this vendor in question here, were the results what you expected?
Exceedingly so.
That being said, so considering all that, it was said publicly recently that that there was blatant corruption in Orange County related to these matters. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Disagree.
Okay. Would you be someone that would agree or disagree that to this statement, not making any assumptions this was a scam? Would you agree with that or disagree with that?
Disagree.
Okay. Last question I'd ask you, and I'll ask you again. If someone were to say, quote, make no mistake, this contract is in a direct violation of the public procurement policy of Orange County, would you agree or disagree with that statement?
Disagree.
Okay. And that's all I have. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, Alicia, I think everybody in the room would agree, IT services are costly. And you made a great point that you didn't need a mid-level manager, you needed an expert to come in. You mentioned, you know, if you had not brought in STAR or an equivalent to STAR, what were we in danger of in the county? What was the critical that you had to bring somebody in to get some specific work done?
I appreciate just giving the context because I think we keep alluding to it, but I think people lose sight. September 22, Suffolk County was breached, ransomware.
Yeah.
It's November. Everyone is on edge. There's not a county, I don't care where you are, that's not concerned about ransomware. So just let's set that at the level of what is overarching for everyone. And then we have, the other thing is not only do we have projects that are failing, do we not have concerns with vendors, we are being bombarded with requests to move forward from departments. We're stale, you know what I mean? Because we're short-staffed on what we're doing, they're spinning the plates, and we're trying to get everything to move forward. It's a perfect convergence. So for me, at the end of the day, yeah, we needed to have that expertise, it needed to be quick, and we needed a quick roadmap just so that we can get a stopgap to get us through.
And as you had answered for Legislator Fagione, it was effective. STAR was exceeded your expectations. And I know, you know, to your point too, just last week, because my family uses Crystal Run Health, they were hacked. Ellenville Hospital over the weekend or last Friday was hacked by, you know, unknown sources. So I mean, it's just the world that we live in. So originally, you know, if we follow the invoices here, you expected STAR to be in and out in 2 months for $65,000.
Correct.
But STAR wasn't in and out. Why not?
Right.
And then everyone said we follow the procurement policy and it extended further on. And I trust that. But in your opinion, why was STAR kept on for additional time?
Because as soon as STAR, from what I understand, again, out of the day-to-day and sitting and getting the weekly conversations, is we had a public safety, 2 platforms. The county has 150 applications. These are just 2, but they're high priority, they're public safety, and they need to be addressed. There's concerns. We had to pivot him as soon as he walked through the door. So we never had that initial assessment and full review of what we needed within the department. Again, it's got to be taken in scope. And I do want to share with STAR CIO because it's been a shame with all of this. At the end of the day, STAR CIO, as I have alluded to earlier, is a CIO, a CTO, and has digital transformation expertise. In my opinion, there is not a county that would not want that person at the table in their operation right now.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, thank you for your time. Is there anything that you think that you would have done differently based on everything that has kind of transpired over the last couple of weeks?
Nope.
And just going back to, was there any, when you were looking at, you know, the different pricing and things that were going week by week, was there a moment, was there going to kind of be a cutoff where you felt, okay, the pricing is getting out of hand, we need to stop? When would that line have been?
When we had a CIO and we were able to transition the duties.
So if we would have gotten to $800,000 worth of expenses in a year, that would have not been a line.
I'm not sure at this moment to tell you that. We have projects moving, things are going. We're in a much better place than where we were 8 months ago.
But again, the original quote was 65,000, this is what we need, this is absolutely what we're budgeted for. And we know that we want a full-time person. We know what that's gonna look like.
Correct?
But to your knowledge, there was not really a line where we're saying, okay, listen, when we pass that 200,000 mark, that 300,000 mark, that 400,000 mark, we're gonna have to figure out something better because this is costing taxpayers money.
No, because well, the reality is, you're right. The concern is a larger cost to the taxpayers. So I understand, and it's in a nutshell, when you look at it, narrowly focused, yes, it's a lot of money. But at the end of the day, it's what we needed. The consequences would be more costly because I'd be at this table and you'd be asking me, why didn't we do something differently?
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Deputy County Executive, you're up, my friend.
Good morning, I think, still.
Good morning, sir. Anything you want to tell us, or you want to do questions, or?
No prologues, no monologues.
What's
Next
that?
questions.
You're just ready to go. Okay, so you've been in government longer than anybody I know, I think. Not necessarily.
40 some odd years, yeah. of course. How that happened?
The selection process, were you involved in it?
No.
Okay. And do you know who was?
I knew that Alicia was involved, that Sims Sukeda was involved.
Were you involved in the numbers or negotiations, anything to do with this?
No.
What was your involvement with this contracts, if any?
My, let me put it this way, when the contract comes to me, it's a big cake. Okay, it's already been negotiated, procured, if you will, negotiated, it's been reviewed by law, budget, risk manager, and then maybe the other department head might be involved, then it comes to me.
Were you surprised that it wasn't negotiated?
I would assume that most of them are negotiated, I would assume that it was negotiated.
When you signed this, you thought it was negotiated?
When I signed the contract, my understanding was that it was the best price that the county could possibly get.
And you signed contract one,
Yes,
well, you didn't sign the other two, is there a reason or just availability?
they were never presented to me.
Okay. And so when you sign the contract, you're just verifying that every other department signed it? Is there any other thing you do? Do you contact anybody and discuss it with them? or-
No, not usually, unless I see something in the contract that is off-putting, meaning that it might be too high a price, or that the services might be questionable. And I do on occasion call up the lead negotiator person and ask for clarification on some of the contracts.
So you pay attention to that box, who the lead negotiator is?
Absolutely.
And
I
did that,
look at the service, the vendor, the justification, the negotiator, and then if everybody else is signed off.
so on contract one, since that's the one you signed, Alicia was the negotiator. Did you assume she negotiated that?
Yes,
Are you surprised to hear today that she said she didn't?
I thought everything was up for negotiation, so I'm a bit surprised.
At what, were you aware when you signed the contract of the relationship with Mr. Chapman?
No,
When did you find out what the relationship with Mr. Chapman?
soon thereafter, soon after it was signed.
Before the second contract, or,
I only signed one contract.
I know, but before the
First time.
second
It was
contract?
in January that I signed the contract. It was sometime in January, early February,
Same month, before the second contract.
in that same timeframe.
Are you familiar with this continuation agreement? I'm probably not using the right word, but the document that gets signed to go to the next contract?
No,
You shook your head yes, but you said no.
no, no, I don't. I'm not part of that process.
But are you familiar with what triggers the requirement?
No,
Okay. Now, are you surprised that a contract went from 65,000 up, or is that something you've seen in your career?
I didn't see the contract go up from 65,000.
No one ever told you it was higher than 65,000?
Not until September or October.
Did you have any dealings with the computer department over that time?
Just knowing that it wasn't working as well as we would like it to. And we were looking to try to get a full-time CIO, which we attempted to do 2 years ago. and that effort continues.
So when you said it wasn't working, that was prior to Star CIO, correct?
I don't think it's worked well in a long time, but that's my own personal opinion.
It's still not working well?
Could be better.
Now, when you were mentioning 2 years ago that, we pulled the Ways and Means Committee meeting, legislator Anagnostakis referred to it, and I agreed with his assessment that you asked for 175,000 for 2 positions.
I'm not sure about that. I saw that, I reviewed that myself, that committee meeting from October.
It was October of 2021, Ways and Means.
Right. So it was when you were discussing the changes that were going to be made to the executive budget for that year, 22. So the work had already been discussed, I think, about the CIO while we wanted it. This was where Ways and Means Committee was making changes to the proposed executive budget.
So what I saw from that meeting was that legislators Benelli, Hines, Menuda, and Benton asked for more information. We didn't say we're against it. We said we'd like to hear your full presentation.
Right.
But then I don't remember you ever coming back with a presentation on it.
That was in October, and the budget.
Of
amendments-
2021.
The budget amendments were made and it was done.
Right, but then we didn't hear about it until August of this year.
Not from me, you didn't hear from me either. I wasn't there.
Right, but my point is, you had a program, you wanted a CIO.
Yep.
And even Commissioner Swikata said, you've been asking for a CIO for years,
That's right.
but you didn't ask us after that 2021, when those 4 legislators said we would like more information.
We brought it back to you this year for 2024 budget.
Right.
It looks like we're gonna get it.
Right, but that's 2 years later is my point.
Well, again, you being in maybe in here, in this business for 40 years, I think in terms of budget cycles. So I didn't get it for 22, I'll try it for 23 or 24, and that's what I did. So,
Okay, typically, I know you're a passionate guy in government. You say, I want a CIO, we say, we're sort of receptive, is what the minutes kind of said. We didn't say yes, we didn't say no. We said, bring us more information, and then we got nothing.
well, here we are today, asking for a CIO, we're gonna introduce one to you this afternoon.
Right, no, and I think we're all happy that that's taking place, but
Three speeds in government: slow, stop, reverse. Okay, so we're moving in slow. That's good.
yeah, I guess so. So with respect to the invoices, who signs off when these invoices come in from somebody?
Once I sign the contract, I no longer see any of the invoices.
I know that, but your knowledge of county government, these invoices come in, who signs them?
Finance department. I would just say finance.
Well, finance pays them, but somebody has to direct them to pay it, right?
Probably the manager of the department. I don't see that part of the work, so. But I assume it's, comes. to the
As
manager.
county executive,
Yes,
who approves invoices?
I believe it's the department head and then paid by finance.
Okay. So you have no idea how much we paid Star CIO so far?
No,
And you don't know, you never knew about the second contract?
no,
And you didn't know about the third contract?
not until September or October this year.
If the second contract was presented to you, would you have signed it?
I don't know.
Or you,
I probably would ask questions like I usually do with these things.
yeah, because your name was on it, it was crossed out, and then
I
signed.
didn't put it on there.
What's that?
I did not put that name on there.
Right, no, I know that. Okay, anybody else? Kevin Darren?
Thank you again, Deputy County Executive. So I want to just kind of stay on that. Is it common for Alicia or others to sign on your behalf or on the county executive behalf?
When I'm not around.
To your best of your knowledge, do you remember if you were there on that particular day?
Say,
Do we have the page for the contracts?
We have to look through the document.
Contract tab is tab 2.
The main point is it common practice for Alicia to sign on your behalf?
I sign about 90% of the contract.
And when you don't sign, are you notified that Alicia signed on your behalf?
Sometimes.
And were you notified that she signed on your behalf for this particular contract?
No,
And there's 2 contracts related to this. And to the best of your knowledge, you do not recall the specifications of that contract.
I did not know about the second and third amendments. One contract, 2 amendments. I was not privy to those 2 amendments.
And you said that you can't really know right now whether or not you would have actually signed off on that.
Probably not without question.
Probably not without questions. And based on the information that you have now, would you have signed on that contract?
Again, it's speculative.
Would you say that the services that were provided have been satisfactory?
I would hope so. I don't know specifically if they are or not.
Did you find that the price tag that came with those services, did you feel that they were an accurate assessment of what those costs should be?
The $65,000, yes.
But not the ballooning of up to
I
800,000?
can't comment on it. It was important to it.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Eric. I just have one question. You just mentioned that you signed about 90% of the contracts. You mentioned you've been in government for more than 3 or 4
Half a
years.
decade, half a century.
Is it common or uncommon to have amendments attached to certain contracts or contracts? Is that a common thing, uncommon, is it super rare, unrare?
I wouldn't know.
That's all I have right now. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, thank you. Good. Over there.
You have a moment.
All right, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll hear from our county attorney. And I know you wanted to jump in there, so do you want to cover what you were going to jump in on, right?
Yes. So when we presented those documents, we had made it known that we wanted to have a few things redacted so that they weren't readily available to the public. But we weren't trying to keep them from the committee, so we said that although they're blacked out in the documents, that I would bring an unredacted copy here so you could look at it now and see what those numbers were. So I'd like to do that. And again, we're talking about particulars of the metrics for IT. And I want to be very cautious in not giving more than the minimum amount of information to the public so that hackers can't go ahead and do it. It has nothing to do with substance on these things because as you saw, only numbers were, well, you will see now, only numbers were. There's 2 times it was redacted. There's these here, and then on the back of this, these. And so you can take a look at your redacted one and then take a look at this so you can have the actual number. So I was talking about how many servers we have, other particulars of our facilities. And so in erring on the side of caution, I would rather not have that information out. You brought up earlier when we were sending it out to somebody who was coming to us and asking us for something. And I would very much like to address that, but I think I have to address it in executive session for public safety. So again, we're not giving information out as to how people might be able to get a hold of that information.
You know, my concern was it's so sensitive that even our fellow legislators can't see it, yet someone in county government can send it to someone that we have no relationship with or contract. We didn't even know we're going to hire this individual yet, at least.
And I can address that in executive session as to why that would be.
Okay.
I'd be very happy to do so.
Yeah, well, we'll leave that to the end of the meeting if we think we need to do that. I know we have your letter. Is that still your position, or would you like to tell us something first before we get into questions?
At the outset, and I think Deputy County Executive Poor said it, is that throughout this, people are constantly talking about 3 contracts, 3 contracts, 3 contracts. There were not 3 contracts. And there's also some references earlier about a contract that was amended over and over and over and over and over, I think. That's the right number of overs. That's incorrect. There is one contract, the initial contract, and there were 2 amendments to that contract. And the reason that it's important is not just semantics. It dictates the procurement policy. And that's what we did. The initial one was procured in a certain way. And because of the substance of it, professional services, there is specific provision in the procurement code that says if we need to keep these same types of services and potentially related services to this, that does not need to go through any procurement whatsoever. that's specific. And I want to, I know that all of you know this, but I want to underscore it. This procurement policy was the one that was adopted by this very legislature in the end of 2021. Also, with respect to what we're going to get into is the anti-nepotism provisions in the county. Those are contained in the Code of Ethics, also passed by this very legislature. Both of them were passed unanimously. So what my job is, and what I oversee in the parts of the legalities of these things, is I abide by the rules. I'm guided by the rules. Do I know that things might be done in a different fashion? Are there alternative ways? Of course, there's alternatives to lots of things, but I'm presented with a process. I want to make sure that that process is in compliance with state law, county rules or codes in this instance, code of ethics and the procurement code. And that's what I sign off on. That's my review level. I don't oversee the contract after the administration of the contract, except if there are problems. And then the department head would come in and present a problem to one of the many lawyers I have. They're all assigned to different departments. And then we help them work through problems that there might be on a particular contract, as well as on many other issues. But a lot of, under our government, things are set out and powers are dispersed. Right? That's the essence of our charter, right? This county, like many others in their former iterations, were a board of supervisors. So you had one body that was made up of the supervisors of every town who would come together usually once a month to handle the county's business. That's what they did. So when we became a charter county, it's an alternative form of government. Certain other laws that would normally apply to counties don't apply to the county charter, the counties that are governed by a charter. I heard a couple of people say earlier that, well, it would reach a certain stage where it would come before this legislature so that we could review it. There's never a contract that comes before you. And that's not because anybody is hiding it in the executive branch. That's the way it's supposed to work. The executive branch has, and the county executive has, the entire power of the county when it comes to contracts, signing, implementing, procuring them. That is all the county executive and the executive branch. And the departments, and other questions that were talked about earlier, well, you know, wasn't this reviewed by 6 or 7 other people? It's not. Departments handle their own business. Department heads are not figureheads. They take responsibility for the entirety of contracts and other issues that come before that particular department. So they're considered responsible for it. They are usually the end of the line with respect to administration of contracts within their realm. And that goes for every department. They have many times, depending upon the size of the department, specialized contract people within their departments who go through the contracts, and the head of the department may see only certain of those and not all of them. Other departments that are smaller would see all of them. The insurance aspects of these contracts are signed off on by risk, right? The legal ends are signed off by me. That's the purpose of this cover letter, so that when it does get for signature, get the time for signature, as Deputy County Executive Poor said, all this is a review has been done. It would slow the county down to a halt if every one of the people on that contract review cover sheet were to go and start anew and go over all of the details of every single contract. There are more than 2,000 contracts that go through, and that's just the contracts that deal with a lot of services. There's many more contracts that deal with goods alone. And so there's a lot to be gone into with every contract, and you have to rely upon others. Who signs the contract? These contracts were signed appropriately. Under the charter, it is the county executive that has the power to sign all contracts. Under the code of the charter, that accompanies it, and again, was also passed by this legislature. The charter and the administrative code are together in one. They have the same force and effect, except that one contradicts the other. The administrative code allows the county exec to delegate powers dealing with his office, as you would imagine he would do, or she would do when county executive Phillips. And so under this, the county executive has for a long time, well before I was here, a long-standing, years-long practice, I'm not sure when it started, in which it's not the county executive who's the first one that would be in line to sign a contract. It would be the deputy county executive. And then if the deputy county executive is unavailable, then it would go to the third in line, operations, which in this case now is Alicia D'Amico. And then if neither one of them are available, then the county exec might sign it himself, which is what occurred in this particular instance. So the contracts were all signed appropriately. The contracts were all procured appropriately, the contract and the two amendments. And when you look at you will have the procurement code.
It's in tab 4.
Thank you. The part 10, as you know, unfortunately, pages aren't numbered. Part 10 is for professional services, and it talks about the different levels. And at the time that this was initially done, this was in the category or bracket of 25,000 1 penny up to 99,999.99. If it's within that range, then procurement methods may include soliciting written quotes from at least 3 separate potential contractors. It's actually not mandated, but that's the typical practice, is to get 3 quotes, 3 written quotes. And that's what occurred here. And you were presented with that information via my response to the legislators on the documentation. And then there is a provision on the next page of this version of it. Under C, right, part 10C, exemptions from solicitation for professional services. It says certain types of professional services may be exempt from the solicitation process. That means you don't have to go through any solicitation. You don't have to do certain steps. It's exempt from the process. In a similar fashion, that professional services generally are, under New York state law, are exempt from any bidding. And people constantly refer to it as no bid contract. Well, professional services are never bid under laws that are set forth by the state. They're exempt from bidding. You could choose to bid it if you want to, but there's not a requirement for any professional services contract in the state of New York to be bid. So to constantly refer to this in a derogatory fashion as a no bid contract is just really nonsense, because professional services are not bid. And then there are some contracts that are exempt from professional services, and it talks about them here, right? And it goes through N. That ends up on the next page. And what is exempt from professional services, that is that you don't need to go back out and solicit them, are purchase orders or contracts for existing projects that require the continuity of professional services to ensure proper completion of the project. And so that's where Amendment 1 and Amendment 2 came about. There's another provision saying there should be some support for that, and that was the continuity exception, right? It was the continuity of professional services. It was dated June 19th, and to answer your questions, why was that so? The initial project, the initial contract was for a few weeks' time, spread out over potentially up to 2 months, a few months, up to July, actually, I think it was the initial one. And then when they went out for the First Amendment, which was ultimately done by July 15th, I think, is that this was done because according to N and the other provision in the code, is that you should have a continuity exception if you're going to go out and amend under this exemption from professional services. So this was prepared in the context of that First Amendment. So it wasn't like a separate agreement or anything else. This was the backup, so to speak, that one needed if you wanted to go ahead and have a continuity of professional services exemption from any solicitation for the professional services. And so that's why it was done at that time, connected with that First Amendment, which continued on over into the Second Amendment. So it's important to understand it was one contract with two amendments because they get treated differently. The two amendments were done under the exemptions from professional services. The first one was not done under exemption. It was done under the code for that particular level of procurement that they thought that they would be dealing with at a time. Also, and I'm not one to ask the value of these things. I review, again, many contracts. And I look at the legality of these contracts. I don't, that's what I deal with. I deal with the facts of the law. I don't deal with the administration of the contracts. I don't deal with whether or not we might be able to get a better deal. That is for the department head. That's their responsibility to determine. And if they don't do a good job, they have to answer the county executive for that. The amount of the contract wouldn't be eye-popping to me at all. If you worked out the initial one, which was just for one person, and carried it out, I have a different calculation than somebody earlier who said it was over $1 million. I don't believe that's correct. When you work it out, I had worked it out to be after the fact, not then, to be a little over $400,000. The First Amendment added scope. It wasn't the same scope. It added some scope. And it also added another person to that task. And then the Second Amendment added some additional scope and added a third person under that task, under that amendment. So it wasn't just one person who got this, all of this money. But I think that what I want to underscore is that both the contract and both amendments were procured properly under this code, the code that this legislature has adopted. And it was also done in connection with the anti-nepotism rules that are contained in the county ethics law. Now, under the county ethics law, there is a provision dealing with anti-nepotism. There is nothing in there that really talks about anti-nepotism in contracts for purposes of awarding or prohibiting them whatsoever. They talk about hiring, anti-nepotism in hiring. Even if you were to go ahead and equate hiring with procurement, which I don't think you ought to do, and I think it's out of context given the rest of the wording of that provision in the ethics code. The only thing that the ethics code prohibits in hiring is the person who is related can't be part of the selection process. And they also can't be overseeing this person either directly or indirectly. And none of that happened here. I mean, we're not even talking about hiring employees. And those two provisions don't deal with contracts. But even if they dealt with contracts and you wanted to make an analogy, they were followed. I actually inquired when I was advised that by Alicia D'Amico, and she had said, well, we're getting to the point where this person really looks like it's one of the ones we want to be considering. She said, but he's Langdon Chapman's brother-in-law, department head. Does that pose any problems? So I said, from a legal point of view, it poses no problems whatsoever. And I was standing on the ethics code, which is the only thing we have with respect to that. There was a very old executive order that I'm not sure is even in place. That executive order also talked about hiring and actually exempted brother-in-laws, among others. But it's I advised Alicia that there was no legal prohibition on awarding the contract to Star CIO, even though it had been, I had asked her whether or not Langdon was going to be part of the selection process. And she said, absolutely not. And Langdon, when he spoke to you last week, said that he spoke with me. I did speak with Langdon after this blew up to make sure, doing my job and trying to defend the county, that he did not go ahead and have any involvement whatsoever in the selection or the oversight. I knew, he confirmed it, but I knew that he wouldn't have any oversight of it because it's a completely different department that he would have nothing to do with. But I wanted that confirmation from him, and that's what I told him. So it was done in accordance with state law, which allows professional services to be exempt from the bidding. It was done in conformance with the procurement code, which is a code that we're bound by in the executive department. And it was done in accordance with the code of ethics with respect to the relationship issue of another county employee. And as I said before, it was signed appropriately under the Orange County Charter and the administrative code provisions allowing the designation, delegation of powers from the county executive to sign contracts, to be the first one in line to be the deputy county executive and the second one director of operations. Although the county executive, of course, could always sign contracts. I'll answer any questions that you want.
Okay. When you or somebody from your office signs one of these contracts, do you get into verifying whether it was properly procured, or is that not your role?
I look on the cover sheet, which is one of the purposes of the cover sheet. If you look on that, it
That
tells
would be tab 2,
tab 2. Okay, you can look at any one.
page.
Well, the first one,
Yeah.
the says County of Orange contract cover sheet. Right? This tells you a lot of information. Right? Staff research, et cetera. By the time I get it, it would have been signed off by Commissioner Sawatka, as noted here. I think it's not correct that it's 1/1/23, although that's what it says here, since she signed above it 1/10/23, so I think it's likely should have been 1/10/23 on that department approval. But I get it at that point. If you turn to the next part, this is where you get all of the particulars that I need to be looking at. Right? Talks about the contract type, contracts other than real estate grant, or review what they've done in order to get to the point of getting it to me. All these different types of, whether it's preferred source, discretion of the commissioner, written quotes, competitive bid, best value, emergency contract, were there any pre-qualified bidders, and as professional services. And it says here, this, what's checked is this procurement was initiated on or after January 1, 2018, and is subject to the following requirements. Discretion of department head, and is not checked. The second one seeks 3 quotes if greater or more than 25,000 up to 99,999.99 cents. Right? So I knew that it's a professional services, and therefore, under the code, even though professional services wasn't checked, I knew that it's professional services, given the description that I get with the contract. And they got 3 quotes. Right? That's what they were supposed to do. They're supposed to get 3 quotes to compare and then choose one of them. And according to this contract cover sheet, that's what they did. And I knew that it was professional services in this category. That's exactly what they needed to do. Like if they were at $100,000 and they checked off, obtained 3 quotes, I would say you can't do it that way, and I would return the contract. We return contracts from time to time back to departments when we think that something hasn't been done in accordance with the rules that they need to be done. There's no need for me to do that here because it fell right within the parameters of what the procurement code requires.
Okay, and now we were calling them contract 1, 2, and 3. Your terms are contract 1 with 2 extensions.
Well, they're amendments, and that's how they are actually, as you see it.
Mhm.
It doesn't have an agreement attached to it. it has the first one, amendment number 1 to services agreement. And it says, the amendment modifies a master services agreement dated, and that was the original one. In consideration of mutual covenants and conditions contained therein and other good and valuable consideration, all parties to this amendment agree as follows. And they have 2 provisions of this. And it says, all other terms in the agreement, that's the original contract, except as specifically amended or modified herein, shall remain in full force and effect. This isn't a brand new contract. It's just an amendment to an existing contract. It happens routinely in not only this municipality, but every municipality. You have contracts, for one reason or another, terms need to be changed, amounts need to be adjusted. And the way to do that is you don't start over again. You simply amend that original contract. And that's what was done here. And the same thing that there was amendment number 2 to the master services agreement. And they tell you what was in each one of these, they tell you what was modified. That's the whole purpose of an amendment. They'll tell you what was modified. And you do that for both amendment number 1 and amendment number 2. And that's why I think it's appropriate to identify them as the original contract and 2 amendments to those contracts.
Does it surprise you that contract 1 is a 6-month period, but they talk about 2 months?
You have to look at, there are many different forms of contract. Contracts aren't plain vanilla. Like I said, there's over 2,000 of them that pass through, and that's just on the services side, not even counting all the goods purchased by the purchasing department of general services. And so sometimes it's done one way and sometimes it's done another way. Here, there was the original amount of 2 weeks and
2 months.
2 months, I apologize, 2 months. And then, but it was not required that they be there every day according to the contract. It was done on a number of hours, et cetera. And so I think that the reason that it was chosen was that it could be spread out over more than just the 2 months worth of work. So that didn't raise a red flag for me at all.
What about looking back now when you see the invoices?
The invoice is a slightly different issue. The invoices, if you look at the initial contract, and again, it's behind the initial contract. The initial contract, let's say, is page 1. And the second page of the contract review cover sheet. And then some budget information. And then there's the underlying agreement that's incorporated. And if you look at the second page of that, it says the service team under this statement of work, SOW, statement of work, automatically renewed for a new 8-week period program unless canceled by either the client or Star CIO in these 30 days. So I think they were billing on these new services, an automatic extension. Now, I don't normally see these things, these automatic, I don't see the invoices coming in. Again, that's within the department. And if I had to look at all the invoices, I would never get any work done.
I'm not suggesting you should. I'm saying the contract is a 6-month period. They're saying it's only 2 months worth of work. When you look at the invoices, they're blowing through the 2 months rapidly, which could lead someone to assume that it was worth more than $65,000 from the get-go.
No, I don't agree with the final premise, the final conclusion you draw. But yes, that someone should, in the department, they are supposed to be looking at these. They're the ones that receive the invoices. And sometimes it's not the department head, sometimes it's a fiscal officer within the department will review those invoices. And then if they believe it's appropriate, they pass it on through budget and finance. Budget to determine that there's money in there to be paid, and the finance to confirm that and also issue the checks if it's appropriate. So
it says it's going to continue to renew after 2 months within that 6-month period.
but it but it doesn't say that it's going to necessarily go over the 65,000. And the first one, they could have only done, they were going to pay for a certain amount for the 32,005 and then another 32,005. But it doesn't say that if it automatically renews, they're automatically going to be getting paid more for the same work.
Well, they're getting 32,000 a month. It says that.
It says that they will get paid 32,500 on contract signing. Client is then invoiced 32,500 at the start of every service period. So if there isn't going to be another service period, then they wouldn't be able to bill for that.
But it automatically renews.
The service, it automatically renews unless they are, there's no work for it to do, unless canceled.
Yeah.
So you're talking now about the administration of the contract. So just looking at the contract, looking
That's
forward.
what this whole committee is talking about.
But your question is, by looking at this, wasn't it always going to go over the 65? And I'm saying no. It allowed it to go over that if necessary, but it doesn't mean that it is going to go over that. And so from looking at this, you wouldn't say, oh, this is going to go over 65,000. And in any event, it still wouldn't make a difference for purposes of procurement unless it went over the 99,999.
So in April, when it hit 130,000, shouldn't somebody pump the brakes, in your opinion, and say, whoa, we made a mistake, this should have been an RFP?
I have to look at all of those invoices, and I would have to look at them in context with the
You
work.
have
that was
them.
done.
The
I know
invoices are
that.
here.
I don't like to give offhand answers. I don't do that when I give legal advice. And I'm not going to do that before this committee. But one would have to look at those invoices, look at the contract, look at what they were performing, and see whether or not they were going over at any point in time over a threshold that they should not have gone over. Somebody should be looking at that in the department. That's what the
In the-
department is for.
The Department of General Services.
Yeah, whatever department who's administering the contract, yes.
And now, if that happens, whose job is it to remedy that? Do they have to notify you and say, wow, we should have done an RFP, or do they just do it on their own? How does that get corrected?
If they believe that something is happening that they can't self-correct by saying, all right, we're going to stop this and we're going to say demand a return our money if there was no basis for paying the original, sometimes that would just stay within the department. If there's a problem with it, then they would call the law department, whatever attorney is assigned to general services at that time, and ask, what do? We have a problem here. And then we try to reconcile that problem, try to resolve it in accordance with whatever the law happens to be.
Did that happen in this case? Somebody reach out to you?
No.
Okay. Should it have happened?
Again, I have to look at those services that were asked for and look at it in the time of what work was being done, whether or not there was a potential agreement being put in place to amend something that would have been appropriate under the no solicitation provision of professional services, that you could do that for continuity of professional services. So I'd have to look at all that to determine whether or not they should have done something different than what they did. I can't sit here and say they should have.
In the certificates of insurance, which are after after the contract and the amendments, the county's not listed as a certificate holder. Is that something that should have been done or no? Is that something you require? Or just a certificate of insurance is good enough?
It depends upon the circumstances, and that's on the contract cover sheet. I rely upon the risk department. They know what makes sense for the county on any particular contract. And so some contracts, they require additional insureds, other contracts, they don't. It really depends upon the circumstances and the professional judgment of the risk management department.
So you don't review that, you leave it to risk.
I leave it to risk.
But the county does not have a rule that we have to be an additional insured under a contract policy?
Not every single contract, no.
And we don't have to be a certificate holder either.
I don't know what the internal policies are with respect to risk management as to when they're going to require certain levels of insurance. So I can't answer the question.
So that's a question for Mr. Castrical?
Well, he would know that information. There's no, I will tell you that there's no standing law that I'm aware of that would mandate it for this level of work, or this type of professional services. And professional services are looked at differently than other services when you're talking about the contracts involved. When you're talking about different types of contracts, you're talking about insurances are required to be put in place, bonding is required to be put in place. But that's why you have to look at every contract under its own circumstances to see what applies to that particular contract. And I'm not aware of anything requiring any level of insurance for the professional services.
Okay, anybody else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again for your time. My question is just really going to rely on these contracts themselves. Many of us throughout the day, we have mentioned seeing, a number that started at 65,000. It seems like, what was stated was that it was in good faith. They felt that this is what it's going to be. We're going to end at 65,000. We're going to get what we needed out of it. We really weren't going to need to go any further. But what we're seeing afterwards is that whether it's a different contract, it's a different contract, or it's the same contract, but what we're seeing is that nevertheless, the end number is going to end up being substantially greater number than 65,000.
With additional services mandated.
With additional services. One of the questions that I asked earlier today was, we had an opportunity back in August, where Ways and Means meeting, where we could have potentially addressed this and at a substantially lesser cost. It was said for the last couple of days that, we brought in individuals, essentially to kind of, superhero on the department that was in grave and dire need of support, and what was said so far is that we needed to make sure that we were addressing the risks of potential cybersecurity. So you had mentioned that there are no real triggers in place, and that in many cases, we wouldn't really want to have it for over a threshold of 100,000. What would have created a trigger here for us to be able to say, hey, listen?
I don't know if it's fair that I said that there's no triggers in place with respect to going over 100,000. I mean, if it became clear that we were now going to go and not take advantage of the continuity of professional services, then there are clear rules to say when you have to do something over $100,000, and it would be an RFP, never a bid for professional services.
And when here would that have been that threshold? If we're going forward,
If we weren't using a continuity of professional services process, that process is an exemption from solicitation.
a lot of the several legislators, many of them still here in the room, have alluded to concerns either about optics or what have you. To your knowledge, and just from a legal standpoint, are there other counties that have safeguards in place that might avoid any kinds of concerns around this kind of optics? And would you recommend anything that might actually help us for further procurement policy?
I have not reviewed other counties' procurement policies, so I wouldn't know. Most of the procurement policies I've dealt with, other than the counties, are towns, cities, and villages, and they're far less robust than these are. But I haven't taken a look at other counties to compare them.
And to the best of your knowledge, you would say that there's nothing that we haven't done anything wrong, and there's really nothing that we could have done different.
We could have done things differently. You can always do things differently, right? And if people want to have things done differently, then they need to change the rules upon which all of the department heads rely upon. And so, and I do have a very strong feeling that none of this would have been looked at were it not for the brother-in-law connection. And that's really why this was brought to the head. And then everything was to try to find out and put a microscope on it. But there are many large contracts that we have that go through a process and go through a process of getting more and more because it's more and more needed when you do that, whether or not you're talking with professional services, whether you're talking with contracts that are bid, and all of a sudden now you need to go off and you say, well, now I think it's evident we need to have this other room over here. Well, hindsight is a wonderful thing. And could somebody have, under some set of circumstances, tried to anticipate that you would need that room later on? Yes, but there's limits to how much people can look into the future. And when all of a sudden the future is present and there's a need to change the contract, that's what the amendment process is for, whether it's under a bid, an RFP, or a professional services that isn't subject to either a bid or an RFP. So I understand that people could think that we ought to have different rules with respect to ethics, different rules with respect to procurement, and that's fine. And that's good subject for discussion. But what I have to deal with and looking at things on a day-to-day basis is what exists.
I think what I want to, what I'm alluding to is that, to your point, it is perhaps true, and I can't, we can't really know this now, but perhaps that those connections created an optics that led to us being here today. We can't know that, but what I will say is that for our purposes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that at the end of the day, what is most important for us is one, getting down to the truth, and two, making sure that our county residents are getting, getting a fair deal, they're not getting stepped out on a deal that would hurt, us as a county. And so that's really the most important thing. So
Understood.
coming out of this task force, whatever, recommendations come out, one of the things that might be recommended is what can we do better? What can we do to safeguard? What can we do to make sure that even the optics will never occur? Even if we're saying that nothing wrong happened, well, let's make sure that we don't even leave it open for optics or confusion or anything like that. That's really where I'm.
And there's lots of things. You could require an RFP at $1. Is that a wise thing to do? I would say no. Right? So there needs to be, government is a slow process generally.
Mhm.
Purposely so. Because there's a lot of checks and balances in government that you have in order to avoid fraud and corruption that you don't have in the private sector, right? So there's good reason for overlapping, redundancy, et cetera, and a slower process. But I don't think we need some alacrity to go ahead and move the county forward. So I think we do need certain threshold by which department heads can go ahead and have the ability to go ahead and procure certain goods and services. And we have those in place. Whether you want to change those, that's, it's actually the procurement code, even though it was adopted by the legislature and had been since 2010, it's really not appropriately done that way. It's really more appropriately an executive branch function because all of the contracts and procurements are on the executive branch. But certainly the executive branch would take into consideration any recommendations of the legislature saying we would like to see the procurement policy changed in a certain way. And that's always open for discussion. And so you could modify the thresholds, you could modify the exemptions that are listed in there for professional services and otherwise. But I just caution you that you have to worry always about unintended consequences of making those changes. It's fine to make changes in a knee-jerk reaction, but you really have to also consider what else might it impact. And as long as you have that sort of global thought on it, then maybe it can be improved.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Rick, for being here. There's two guys sitting behind you that were talking about how long they've been involved in government. One young guy, just a couple years on, a guy might have been a couple years longer in government. A little background on you. You're the county attorney. How long have you been an Orange County attorney?
Since May of 2022.
And prior to that, you were a county attorney one time previous?
Yes, from 94 to 2001.
Okay. And through the course of your legal work, and you said here today, and I just want to make sure this goes on the record, according to all the documents that we have here in front of us and all the evaluation and stuff, the contract and two amendments, you said earlier, and I just want to reiterate, that these comply with the state law, the county procurement code, and well as the code of ethics. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if anyone,
Just as a sort of an adjunct to that, in addition to my county service, in my private practice for over 35 years, I have counseled and represented many, many cities, towns, and villages as well. So I have an understanding generally of how these laws pertain to all municipalities in New York, other than the state. I've never represented the state.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Did you want to discuss this any further or not?
No, I don't think we need to.
Okay.
Now, as a committee, we have a meeting tomorrow at 1:00. We'll be meeting with the county executive. Does anybody think that we need Mr. Castricone to come in since there was an allegation that there was offer insurance or something like that? I don't know if we need it. Does anybody have that on their mind or no?
No.
No? Okay, and then I guess we need to schedule another meeting after that to review the draft report. We want to give at least 2 or 3 weeks to do that, or 2 weeks? What do you think? That's
2 to 3 weeks.
Is it okay if we schedule that tomorrow?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so let's think about a date.
Mr. Chairman, can I give the committee this document that I think would be helpful?
What is it?
My numbers were questioned, and I just want to give the committee the detailed calculations
Sure.
of how I arrived at the numbers.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so tomorrow, everybody think about a date for a meeting after tomorrow where we can sort of put a report together, or if you think we need to hear from any other people. Anybody else have any issues we need to cover today? All right, hearing none, the motion to adjourn is in order?
So moved.
There's a second. Okay, thank you very much. We are adjourned.